Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Was Iron Man. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the video for more videos. I did not write this story. The original writer is mrkage. Please support him. Izuku rubbed his eyes for what seemed to be 1,000 times. Just today, and it was barely noon. He had hard time with his extracurriculum assignment, as Nizu nicely put it. He understood why they were doing this and how big of an impact it would make on his future hero career. But it was still a lot to take in. All the data, all of possible ideas for resolving the crisis, all of the work they needed to do. His sleeping schedule was basically non-existing. Not to mention his other personal activity. The one he started during second week, without anyone knowing. That one was giving him absolute headache from the sheer amount of information he had to process. If all went according to the plan. Izuku couldn't help but smirk and give silent chuckle. He couldn't wait for results to be shown. Bell rung and he stood up, gathering his things. It was time for lunch. He peeked at May, who was already bouncing up and down. She was already ecstatic about today. Well, so was he. They went to canteen, holding hands. It became sort of habit for them at this point. He still needed to clarify things with May, but right now it seemed to be a formality. After grabbing their meals, they joined Yamamo and her female classmates. He saw his friend moving her eyes between him and May one moment, just to look down and bit her lip slightly. She was in deep thoughts. Should he ask? He probably should. Good friend would do it. Wait, was he a good friend? He hoped so. Midoriya. Azui-san voice pulled him from his musing. I must thank you for those goggles you made. They're very useful. He blinked. Goggles? Oh, right. Frog Girl new support equipment. No need. Besides, May did most of the work there, he said, smiling politely. Yeah, but it was you who worked out the whole waterproofing. Without it the baby would be useless. May said back. He did? Yes, he did. He was about 90% sure he did. Lack of sleep was real pain right now. He wanted nothing but a few hours of good rest. At this rate he would develop insomnia. Which would be very troublesome. Izuku didn't want insomnia. Deku. Something growled behind him. Deku. He hated that name at first, but now he didn't care. Not that he was in right state to care. But only one person called him that. And that person always meant trouble. He should deal with the nuisance, but he had absolutely no energy for it. Oi, look at me, when I'm talking to you, shitty nerd. He felt something grab his shoulder and forcefully twist him around. His tired eyes met menacing red ones. The permanent scowl was in full display. His mind suggested him that it was category 6 on the scale of pissed Bakugo. Maybe 7. Bakugo, what are you doing? Unhand Midoriya at once. Yamamo's voice cut through. She sounded really mad. You think it's funny, you fucking nerd? Having your stupid program call me names? That was really cynical of him. You look like you've forgotten your place. I'm on top, and you're below bottom, you quirkless freak, he screamed right into his face. Murmurs begun to rise around them. He caught May, Yamamo, other girls and some boys from 1A trying to get Bakugo to leave him. If it was another day, he would throw some kind of believable excuse, play a good, little Izuku, who knows that he can't do anything in his life and be done with it. But it wasn't another day. Izuku grabbed Bakugo's hand and squeezed. Hard. He saw him grit his teeth. Good. He wanted to be done with it. You sure you want to do it right here, right now, Bakugo? His voice caused everyone to stop and gulp. It was cold. I'm very sure that this kind of attitude is not applauded in UA, unlike in our middle school. Besides, aren't you a hero course student? You should set up an example for people. Is this what you want them to see? Rabid dog barking at everyone for petty reasons, he growled at the end. Eerie silence rolled over them. He felt everyone staring at them, but for him world seemed to vanish. He kept gazing right into Pomeranian's eyes. He saw a flicker of disbelief, which caused him to smirk. Who do you think you are? Huh? Are you throwing a challenge at me, shitty nerd? Bakugo forced his voice low, but it was still filled with fury. Izuku narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. And what if I am? Scared? Bakugo wrenched his palm away and sent him a dirty look. He answered with his own. Then Blonde Menace huffed, turned around and walked away without another word. It was far from over. And surprisingly he was fine with it. Midoriya? Are you okay? Yamamo asked him worryingly. He turned back and saw concerned faces of all girls. He sighed, getting anger out of his system. Not really. He admitted. They all returned to their lunches in complete silence. He felt May grab his palm in tight grip. He peeked at her, giving her ghost of a smile. He caught Yamamo's hands twitching, undecided to reach across the table for his. He appreciated it. It really warmed his heart. He pushed back the sudden influx of emotions that were swarming in his chest. He would solve it. Later. But he would do it. Before leaving canteen, he quickly caught his friend's hand and squeezed. He wanted her to know that he was okay. Or going to be. She rubbed her thumb against his palm, giving him answer. He and May entered their workshop. His mind already was checking the mental list of things needed to be done before today's test. It had to go well. Perfect was desired outcome, but he didn't count on it. Suddenly he was all but thrown onto bean bags. Moment later he felt a very familiar weight on his chest. May, he asked with evident surprise. She looked up at him, with those beautiful, amber eyes of hers. She shifted close to his face, her grip tightened. Shoo. You need a nap, she whispered gently into his ear. And hug. Don't worry, I'll get everything ready. Till then go to sleep. She kissed him on his cheek. He should protest, but his eyelids were closing themselves against his will. That was interesting development. Usually May was absolutely clueless when it came to human interactions, but she had her moments, when she just knew what to do to make everything better. He loved that part about her. Loved? Yeah, he loved it. Just like her petting his hair, exactly how she was doing it now. That only further plunged him into blissful and desperately needed sleep. May stood up quietly and looked at Izuku. Soft sigh escaped her lips. For the last few days she observed him becoming sloppier and sloppier. Dark rings under his eyes became more pronounced and it seemed like all energy left him. She even saw him biting his hand, just to stay awake during lessons. He wasn't telling her something. She just knew that he hid something from her. But should she ask about it? Especially since it all started after his visit to principal. She didn't know Nizu like Izuku did, but if the person who runs a whole school wants you to visit them out of blue it means something serious. At least she assumed that. No matter. She was going to support her partner anyway. And if it turned into something batshit insane? Even better. That meant more fun. And possible babies. She walked towards workbench and turned on computer. They had a list there. She needed to make sure everything goes perfect, so Izuku wouldn't stress himself further. The test needed to be done before the lab hours were over. After that Yamamo was sure to come by. She was such a sweetheart. But new baby was a surprise, so test had to be done before that. That meant she could give Izuku about 2 hours of sleep. It didn't sit well with her, but what could she do? Her mind wandered back to the lunch. That blonde prick had some balls. But dude had some serious problems. She didn't like him. Honestly, he was probably the first person to ever be hated by her. And he was hero in training? She let out a bitter laugh. She knew him mostly from girls' stories and already she was sure he wasn't suited for heroics. That jerk wasn't quarter the hero Izuku could be. Or her grandpa was. Heck, even she would make better hero. That thought made her pause. Would she? Maybe? Did she even want to become one? Sure, as a little kid, when her grandpa was alive she told him that she'll be a hero, so he could sit back and relax. But how many years ago that was? Probably over a decade now. She shook her head. She didn't have time for this now. Preparations needed to be completed. Izuku needed to buy May a chocolate or something. That nap could easily count as one of the best he ever had in his entire life. He still needed a proper 8-hour rest, but at least now he would drop on his next step. Which was very important right now. He dragged Zipper up and made sure that his hair were contained by his jumpsuit-added hood. Yamamo also deserved chocolate for that. He looked into a mirror, his body clad in form-fitting, black, sturdy fabric. His pilot suit, as May dubbed it nicely. Stepping behind a curtain he walked toward platform. They coaxed Power Loader into giving them another room, which then turned into some kind of launching station and storehouse for armor and its equipment. And after nicely asking Nizu for his consent, they added a garage doors that led outside the building, via Cemento's help. Ready to rock? May asked, laptop already in her hand. She bounced on her feet, grinning at him. Yup. Let's do this. He took a deep breath. Alan, please initialize suit-up sequence. Your wish is my command, sir. Platform floor opened and mechanical arms with tools rose from its inside, along with silver boots. He inserted his legs in them and mechanism closed, making whole thing sit tight. He lifted his arms to the sides and felt gloves slipping in, shutting with short hiss on his limbs. Other parts were slowly added to his body, starting with skeleton, which contained all wiring, then all of the armor that also held pistons. They would allow him to move and generate enough strength to lift about a ton. Finally he felt helmet being added and soon mask shut in. His world went black for a second, before video feed came in along with green interface. Holy crap! That was awesome! Mei shouted, then started laughing. Izuku chuckled at that. Alan, you in? Yes, sir. I'm indeed been uploaded. We're good to go. Good, start virtual walkaround. Downloading setup preferences and calibrating suit environment. On his interface icons began to pop out and miniaturize. He saw 3D image of his body and armor around it. Soon a highlighter in form of sniper circle showed before his right eye and begun following its movement. Wherever he gazed, the object gained green outline and data appeared next to it. Began a check on control surfaces, he commanded. He heard mechanism move all around him with quiet hisses. On his screen he saw exactly which one were in motion. During that he started doing small moves, to see how the suit felt and if there was any problems. There were none, which pleased him. Test complete. Preparing to power down and begin diagnostic. Alan announced. What? No way. We have to further test this baby. You know, take it for a ride. Mei argued while pouting. Ride? You mean flight? Mei, there are still terabytes of calculations needed to be done before the actual flight takes place. AI said in deadpan tone. The two started bantering about what to do. Izuku was amused by this. Actually he wanted to test mrkage some more. Besides flying was fun. He enjoyed those few hours he spent with just gloves and boots zooming around testing room, while checking up on the devices. It was somehow relaxing him. And he needed to get the stress out of him in some way. Alan, please open up the doors. Izuku stated. Mei cheered, already moving toward the exit. Of course, ignore your trusted AI, who has access to thousands of safety protocols, and do whatever you want. Alan said with something similar to huff, but complied with his request. When garage gate was fully open, Izuku took a stance and jerked his hands, activating repulsors. He felt himself hover above the ground, which made his heart beat faster. He leaned a bit forward to get off the platform, turned to the side and begun accelerating. He flew past overjoyed Mei and started ascending up in curve motion. He was alarmed about a collision with tree branch, but ignored it. Izuku gave a shout of excitement. He was flying. He was literally flying in the skies at about 100 kilometers per hour. He heard wind rushing around him, which in some weird way increased his fun. How is it? Mei's voice cut in, her contact popping on the screen. Fantastic. You really should try it, he told her back with laugh. How high you can go, she asked with excitement. Let's find out, he grinned. He changed position of his arms and started climbing up. He ignored the rapid decrease of temperature and pushed higher. This feeling of freedom was intoxicating. Sir, the ice is starting to cover you. Alan's voice was wavered. Soon his interface started glitching out and all faded, leaving him with only two tiny holes in front of his eyes. He heard something blow up. Then gravity took over, plunging him towards the ground. Izuku felt his body spin around and caught glimpses of fast approaching land. Alan. Deploy flaps, he screamed in mild panic. Alan. Silence. Of course, the power was gone, so was communication. He needed to manually restart whole suit. Which meant getting rid of the freaking ice. Izuku reached towards his right hip and flipped open a lever there. He grabbed it and twisted. He heard flaps open and arc reactor whine. Almost immediately screen came back alive, video feed with it. After few seconds of loading up, his repulsors activated, making him zoom forward in sharp slope. He saw a group of students practicing on the field, 1B, if he wasn't mistaken. He flew above their heads, making most of them jump back or take cover. He just laughed it out. Are you alright? Mei asked in worried tone. Yeah, I'm good. Had to do manual restart, he informed. Perhaps, if you wish to go to the space and visit other planets, we should upgrade the suit first. Alan cut in with cheeky comment. We'll think about it later. Now is the fun time. How are specs looking, Mei? He questioned in curious tone. Quite good actually. Pressurization could use more work, but other than that everything is in green. Reactor throttle is functioning better than we expected, she informed him. Good, they worked really hard on that part. He was flying near main building. Suddenly he remembered he had a promise to keep. Izuku slowed down a little, he wanted to savor this moment. Alan, please give me audio from Nizu's office, he asked with smirk. There he saw his dear principal with a cup of tea in his paw, looking through the window. The teacup landed on the floor and shattered. Nizu was looking at him with astonishment. Then his face gained big grin and insane laughter escaped his mouth. It was music to Izuku's ears. All while flying by and waving. "You've got that recorded?" he asked with chuckle. "Of course. This moment needs to be saved for future generations." Alan answered with his own laugh. Izuku made a round around the building and decided to go back. He saw Mei, jumping up with her arms in the air. She smiled brightly at him. He slowed down and positioned himself to land. Gently he lowered himself on the ground. His feet barely touched the grass, when Mei tackled him with hug, sending them both towards the ground, laughing at it. His mask snapped open and he looked at Mei's overjoyed face. He started observing her features. How her lips stretched, showing her white teeth. How her cheeks were dusted with red. How her pink dreadlocks framed her face. How her eyes shone brightly and spun around a bit. She was so beautiful. Her eyes closed a bit and she began to lean towards him. His mouth suddenly felt very dry. Were they going to? Did he want it? Yes. His head moved upwards to intercept her. Their lips touched and hers were so plump and soft. Just like marshmallow. His heart beat so fast that he expected it to explode. The kiss was short. He wanted more. His hand moved towards her head and pushing it downwards. He felt her smile into their kiss, he mirrored it. He didn't know how long they stayed like that, making out on the grass, but he was in bliss. Mei touched his face with her hand, caressing it gently. "Mei," he said in whisper, looking into her amber eyes. "Are we a couple? Like a girlfriend and boyfriend?" She quirked a brow. "Weren't we since our date?" she asked innocently. He laughed and kissed her again. That answer was so like her. Izuku was glad for it. He really was. He was overflowing with joy. But he couldn't help but think that something is missing. Mei blinked. What was she doing again? Oh right, tinkering with her baby. Since yesterday she was distracted. And the reason? She turned around and looked through garage doors. There he was, Izuku in mrkage, using repulsor blasts on the moving targets to get a hang of aiming system. She still wanted to know how this repulsor baby worked. She used her quirk and zoomed closer on his head. She wanted to see his face. His green eyes and freckles. She wanted to kiss him again. Quiche. Her cheeks heated up. She kissed Izuku on the lips. Or maybe he kissed her. Did it matter? Not really. It was, she didn't know how to describe it. Like she was struck by the lighting. And she wanted more of that. Was this the feeling her female cousins told her about? When you love someone and want to always be by their side? Mei didn't know. She remembered him asking about them being a couple. She laughed silently at his silliness. Of course they were. "Mei, I'm going to fly around a bit, okay?" Izuku asked in slightly muffled voice due to the suit. She smiled and nodded. When he rose up, she stepped outside and started following him with her gaze. Using her quirk she zoomed in and out. She watched him do barrels, stopping and turning around in midair, climbing up and diving down. That was a show she could watch all day. Suddenly something weird happened. Just like during yesterday's test, when she followed him with her eyes. The strange feeling of calmness started overtaking her. She still felt her never-ending energy and excitement, still could think of ideas for adorable babies, but that composure made it all more clear. It was giving her better control of her mind and body, everything was in sync better than it always was. Before she could think about it more, Izuku gave out the disturbed cry. She snapped her gaze towards him, just to see him skydive. What she heard next made her heart stop. Momo looked around the corner to check if she was being chased. It was clear. She breathed out and continued her escape from the building. She still had more than halfway towards the door. Today's training involved something that didn't possess fighting at its center. It was all about a stealth. Hero Team had to get into the building and get back a flash drive with data that was protected by Villain Team. She had a very strong feeling this scenario was made by Aizawa-sensei. It ended up with her being the odd one today, due to the uneven number of students. She knew that it would be helpful for her future hero career. Not always you could have a backup. But of course she had to get the short straw. Her enemy was none other than Bakugo, who was parried with Uraraka-chan. She pitted Gravity Girl, no one wanted to be in team with Explosive Teen. Maybe Kirishima-san, but other than him, everyone tried to avoid the blonde jerk. Mei was starting to rub on her. After studying the building plan and being previously informed that flash drive was somewhere on the last floor, she decided that using the fire escape to climb up and get through the roof entrance was her best course of action. She entered the building without much problem and started looking around. Fortunately for her, she followed Uraraka-chan's angered voice. She was arguing with Bakugo rather loudly. From their talk, she was sure that Blonde once again left his partner to try and search for her. That meant he was on lower levels. Momo created a stun gun and shoot at unsuspecting girl when she had her back towards her. After quick usage of capture tape to eliminate her classmate from exercise and grabbing the needed item to complete her mission, she started going back towards the roof exit. But of course, due to it being a training, All Might announced that Uraraka-chan was captured. After that she heard a loud explosion. Bakugo was gunning her down. To secure USB stick she created a small pouch and pinned it to her skirt. She used the new method of utilizing her quirk. That thought put a smile on her lips. She, Midoriya and surprisingly May spent some time theorizing about the case of what they called flash creation. Trying to replicate the thing she did during USJ, they discovered something. Turns out creation was semi-sentient. If she possessed the knowledge of how something was built and trained herself to visualize that object as fast as she could, then her quirk learned that. So with just a basic thought of what she was needing, creation reacted, searched for necessary information and produced it. She was so overjoyed by it, that she hugged baby-making duo as hard as she could. Which ended up with her being absolutely embarrassed later. She heard explosion behind her. It was close. Too close. Making a quick decision, she abandoned a stealthy trek and started running toward the exit. She could make something to shut the door for a while, giving her time needed to escape. Suddenly, from the corridor on her right, Bakugo jumped in front of her with outstretched palm. The loud noise and searing hot reached her next. She protected her face with her arms, but the shockwave still pushed her back. How did he manage to catch up and sneak on her? Got ya, you extra. Bakugo growled. Surrender and I may not explode you to pieces. That wasn't something a hero in training should say, she thought bitterly. She rose up and narrowed her eyes. Creating a metal bow staff, she took a stance, preparing for fight. Have it you way, he sounded almost too happy. With vicious sneer he ran towards her. Before he could outstretch his hand, she stuck him on the shoulder and jumped back. She possessed a longer reach and needed to utilize it. Just like Midoriya taught her. Every time, when Bakugo got closer, she hit him and evaded. She tried to turn it into a battle of attrition, by accumulating a damage on her enemy. But that seemed to cause Blonde's anger to rise even more. He pulled his hand forward and caused explosion. But this one was different. It was bright, causing her to close her eyes. A big mistake. When she tried to open her eyelids, she felt a fist connect with her stomach, pushing air out of her lungs. Then next one hit her cheek. Finally a kick to the shoulder sent her rolling on the floor, only stopped by the window. Momo coughed a few times, her vision was blurry because of the tears. She blinked them away and tried to stood up. Her legs were shaking. She peeked at Bakugo. He had a satisfied sneer on his face. Just stay down, like a good extra you are, his voice was smug. Or else, she asked, showing her determined look. He scowled at her, explosions dancing on his palms. Or I'm going to teach you your place, just like I did with Deku. That spiked her anger. Momo wasn't the one to be ruled over by her emotions, but Bakugo's behavior utterly pissed her off. She hated the way in which he referred to other people. But hearing how he called her dear friend? That brought forth her ire. Don't call him that, she said in low, threatening tone. Her eyes narrow. He paused, shock passing his features for a second, before it turned into the animalistic scowl. He bore his gaze into her, but Momo didn't allow him to intimidate her. She wasn't scared of him. You don't know who Midoriya really is. What he can do, she told him, thinking of a way to get out of the situation. Right, forgot you like that loser, he said with weird, disturbing calmness. Bakugo pointed his arm at her and grabbed a pin from his grenade gauntlets. Then you can just fucking die. He pulled out a pin and explosion rocketed towards her, tearing apart floor and walls. Flash creating a riot shield from her stomach, Momo braced for impact. She hit the glass, but almost immediately it gave. She was blown away from the building. 10-story building. Adrenaline rushed through her veins. She started panicking. She was falling down fast. Momo closed her eyes, her mind started going through the list of things that could save her from impending death. Harpoon shooter. That could help. She thought about it components, but her mind went blank. She couldn't think of anything. Her breathing stopped. She was going to die. Right here, right now. She was. Momo. Someone shouted in desperate voice. Then she felt something metallic caught her, behind her back and under her knees. The sound, similar to rocket engines, reached her and soon velocity decreased, until it fully stopped. "Are you all right?" She knew that voice. Even with it was muffled, she would recognized it everywhere. Opening her eyes, she saw a silver face mask with greenish-white eyes. Then it opened, showing her worried face of her friend. "Midoriya," she whispered, completely bewildered. She took a good look at him. He was wearing some kind of metal suit. Arc reactor was at the center of his chest. His arm kept her close to him in bridal-style hold. "Can you stand?" he asked. She gave a shaky nod. He lowered her gently and supported, when her knees almost gave. Her heart was still beating very fast, like it wanted to jump straight from her chest. "Young Yaoyorozu, are you all right?" All Might asked, suddenly appearing next to them with a rush of the wind. "I?" Her voice was weak and mouth dry. Swallowing her saliva and catching a deep breath, she looked at Symbol of Peace. "I think so. Do you need to go to the recovery, girl?" Number 1 hero continued, looking at her with concern. "Yeah, you're absolutely white." Midoriya added with anxiety. "No. I just need to sit down for a while." Momo answered, licking her lips. "Of course. Go the observation room and rest there." "Actually," she started, gazing nervously at Green Inventor. "Could I go with Midoriya?" "To his workshop?" she asked hopefully. All Might blinked at her and turned towards her friend. He just gave a nod and smiled reassuringly at her. "Okay then. Young Midoriya, I'm counting on you." He almost had a heart attack when his UI showed him that the person who was blown away from the building was Yamamo. His body moved before his brain could comprehend it. He dived down and swooped the girl in his arms, keeping her as close as he could. The thought of losing her? He couldn't bear it. Her body was shaking and she was so pale. Whiter than her natural skin color. And the look she was giving him. That utterly terrified gaze. It was so wrong to see her in that state. He knew of only one person who could cause an explosion that big and powerful in 1A. Wrath boiled in his chest. What the hell Bakugo was thinking? Correction. Was he thinking at all? His actions almost lead to his best friend death. Izuku felt his indifference turn into disgust. Combined with his anger. He wanted to punch Bakugo in the face. Hard. But he pushed it all in the back of his mind. Yamamo was more important right now. She needed help. He was glad that she asked All Might to go to the workshop. That way he didn't have to wait for her to come and keep Mei from rushing to the girl. Of course he would ran with her. Izuku walked Yamamo towards the lockers so she could change from her hero costume. He informed her that he will fly back to the lab to get out of the suit and come back for her. She nodded reluctantly. He saw Mei waiting for him in the launching station. Her eyes were glassy. One look at her and he knew that she was aware of what was going on. He was grateful that she didn't go with him. Izuku was sure about what was going to happen next and locker room wasn't a place for it. He sprinted back, not wanting his friend to wait any longer. He saw Yamamo waiting for him, leaning against the wall, looking down on the floor with empty expression. She still was too pale for his liking. When she gazed at him, she immediately ran to him and caught his hand in tight grip. He squeezed her palm. They walked back in silence. Izuku kept sending worried glances towards the girl. The fear in her eyes remained, making a pit in his stomach larger. He hated it. When they stepped through the lab door, Mei zoomed in and embraced their friend. His girlfriend was shaking and crying. Yamamo hiccuped, which soon turned into full-blown weeping. She hugged two of them firmly and buried her face into his hair. Izuku gritted his teeth, his own tears begun to drop. He guided them towards the bean bags. They collapsed instantly onto them with Yamamo at the bottom. He started petting her silky hair, trying to give her more comfort. He hated it. He hated seeing people important to him being in such a miserable state. It broke his heart. He whispered into her ear, telling her she was okay now. That she was safe now, that he and Mei were here just for her. He heard his girlfriend doing something similar. It seemed to work. Yamamo's breath calmed down, but still was hitched. She started, but her voice broke down. "I was so scared," she admitted in whisper. "My mind went blank and all I could think of was how I'm not going to see my pa-parent again. Or why you too." Her declaration caused a new wave of tears to leak from them. They stayed like that for almost an hour. Crying, keeping their bodies as close as possible. After they got themselves under relative control, they cleaned their faces to look presentable. Izuku sent Nizu a message, asking him to release the three of them to home. Principal agreed. During walk towards the train station and ride, they kept their hands locked in tight grips. Yamamo rubbed her thumbs against their palm. He and Mei sat closer to their friend, giving her constant comfort. After getting out of the train, they'd found a secluded place in the near park. God knows how long they sat there, simply hugging each other. Nizu sat in silence, boring his gaze at young man. Young Bakugo held an annoyed expression, scowling at him, constantly fidgeting in his sit. To be honest, Nizu had a passing want to just expel him and be done. But he stopped that thoughts. He wouldn't do it. Not again. He needed to help young Bakugo see the error of his ways. But he couldn't dismiss what almost happened either. Young Bakugo. Nizu started in gentle tone. Do you know why are you here? Teen huffed. Because some extra couldn't handle rough beat down, he grunted. His eye twitched. Superiority complex was very evident. Your actions almost caused young Yaoyorozu to die. Nizu said with steel in his voice. She needed to learn her place. Just like that fucking nerd, young Bakugo's anger seemed to skyrocket. He beat back the comment. He needed to focus on the core of the problem. Nerd? Are you perhaps referring to young Midoriya? He knew answer, but wanted to hear it from the boy. He watched Teen's scowl deepen and his gaze turn from annoyed to malicious one. Of course I meant shitty Deku. She's friends with that quirkless bastard. That sounded like some kind of deep grudge. He would need to resolve this. Maybe a figurative bucket of cold water would help. Nizu took a deep breath and gathered his thoughts. Young Bakugo, while it is true that you possess a powerful quirk, it's only a quirk, a part of you. What makes a great hero isn't his battle prowess, but his effort and choices. Don't let a society-twisted logic cloud your sight from your noble goal. He eyed the teen. He didn't seem much interested in his words. Your actions today allow me to easily expel you from this school. That seemed to get a twitch from young man. But I won't do it. I wish to help you, young Bakugo. So starting tomorrow you are to attend a sessions with Hound Dog, one of your school psychologists, twice a week. Nizu ignored a displeased grimace on Teen's face. However, allow me to get one matter straight. Izuku Midoriya is a kind of person who appears only once every few generations. He's similar to Tesla, Einstein, Hawking. Genius that can change our world with his theories and inventions. His acts are going to shape our future. If your issues with young Midoriya get better of you, if you decide to attack him like you did during yesterday's lunch, if you decide to destroy his work, I am not the one to hesitate. Your expulsion will be immediate, he ended with tone that held no room for argument. Seeing young Bakugo tense, made him sure that the message was passed. You can go now. Nizu observed the teen leave. He hoped that he could do it right this time. Losing another student to their own insecurities and prejudices would be very painful. Momo was thankful for her classmates' concern about her well-being. But it was weird to be showered with that kind of affection. And maybe a little too much. Girls almost never left her side, talking to her about everything really. Fashion, heroes, classes, hot guys, food. Boys were sending her worried glances, some of them expressed their joy that she was relatively unharmed. Even Mineta in his own weird, perverted way. Then there was Bakugo, who became utter class hermit. No one, except for Kirishima-san, tried to talk to him. At best what he received was a cold, dirty glance or fearful look. She was Aizawa-sensei peeking at the blonde from time to time. Momo knew that the treatment Bakugo received was a tad too much. But she couldn't bring herself to care. Using Mei wording, that absolute jerk almost killed her. She was glad that her friends stayed with her until dusk in the park. She needed them and their contact. After she got home, she was immediately tackled by her parents into tight hug. They were aware of what happened, due to principal call. Momo told them about Midoriya and Mei, how they helped her. That seemed to ease her parents' worry at least a bit. She left the part of how Midoriya saved her from death with his mrkage suit. Mrkage, armor powered by arc reactor she helped him create. That was some amazing piece of technology. To create something like that. Once again she marveled at Midoriya's brilliance. Although he said that without Mei and some of her ideas the suit wouldn't be ready and functioning as good as it does. Their friends really were amazing. She walked through packed canteen, trying to find the baby-making duo. She saw them sat on the small table, near exit. They were glaring at each other in silence, a tablet between them. That didn't seem right. Those two always agreed. What's going on? She asked with slight worry. They peeked at her, before returning to their staring contest. Then Midoriya reached towards his pocket and pulled an earpiece. She took it and slid it on. Finally. Please, try to reason with them. They're being childish. Alan whined. She looked between her friends with quirked brow. Momo knew that sooner or later they would talk to her. "We're having an argument." Mei started reluctantly. "About a paint job." Midoriya ended with deadpan tone. "Paint job?" That was the case of those two highly intelligent people to have a spat. Alan was right, they were absolutely childish. "We're designing Mark II and Izuku wants to paint it. Which is very okay with me, because our baby needs to present itself," Mei said, folding her hands on her chest. "That's one reason. The other is that due to the change of the material, Mark II is now gold and it looks horrible. I've tried to add some viridian, but it still screams attention." So then Mei suggested. He tilted his head towards other inventor. "To paint gold to black. It would look totally badass and show everyone just how great this baby is. But of course Izuku thinks," she said with a small glare, "that it would intimidate people. It looks villainous." He almost spat the last word. Midoriya taped a few times on the tablet and presented it to her. Taking a look at it, she saw the green gold armor, similar to Mark I. She understood what her friend was saying. It really screamed attention. Which was complete opposite of what the boy wanted. Besides, it looked somehow off to her. She clicked on the next tab and swallowed hard. This didn't look right. That glowing eyes on the black faceplate gave her chills. Besides, there was too much black. It really gave off disturbing vibe. Momo ate her lunch slowly, thinking of the way to help her friends end this silly argument. She needed to make both sides happy, otherwise they would continue to bicker. And that wasn't in her interest. "How about," she started, gaining their attention. They looks held anticipation. "Maybe instead of viridian use some lighter shade of malachite. Put silver on gold parts. And to make it pop, a darker tone of gray here and there." She looked at her friends. Mei tilted her head and Midoriya was in his thinking position. "Well, Alan, thrill us," Green Inventor commanded. They all looked at the tablet. New tab opened with completely gold Mark II. It really was horrible. Then it begun changing colors from its bottom. After the render was complete, it strayed slowly spinning, showing itself from every angle. "Wow! It looks great," Mei said with excitement. "Yeah, I love it. That's exactly what Suit needed," Midoriya added. The baby-making duo turned towards her with bright smiles. Momo was ecstatic that she could help them. But she had to squish her eyes. How did those two do it every time? Izuku was working on the equipment design for Mark II. He hoped that it could be ready before the sport festival. He would no doubt need it. The ping stopped him. This wasn't the message sound. It was for his personal project. His lips stretched into huge grin. He decided for it to be one of the last batches of needed information. This was more important now. He needed to analyze it all and update his files. The sound of opening doors made him turn away from computer. Yamamo walked in, her polite smile immediately changed into one filled with joy. That was the thing he observed over last few days. Ever since the accident, whenever the girl was with him or Mei, she was at ease and let her prim persona fade away. Sometimes she leaned a bit into them or brushed their hands. Every time this happened his heart skipped a beat. Which absolutely confused him. He was in love with Mei, they were couple. And those feelings, he shouldn't have them towards his best friend. He really needed to solve this whole emotional mess soon. "How is the work going?" Yamamo asked, sitting on the other office chair. "Good. We're getting babies for Mark II ready. Some are still in the design phase, but I'm sure we will get them ready for sport festival. At least some of them." Mei answered with her usual excitement. Then, happened something he wasn't prepared for. Mei walked to Yamamo and sat on her lap sideways. Judging from their friend's slightly open jaw, she wasn't expecting it either. He observed as she timidly moved her hand and started petting his girlfriend. His partner leaned into her touch, her smile changed into a satisfied one. Somehow this scene looked good for him. It was just right. Basically what she said. Izuku answered after getting rid of his bewilderment. "Of course Mark II needs to be built and tested, but we're expecting it all to end well," he ended with small grin. "I'm glad to hear it." Yamamo nodded. "Actually I came to ask you about something." He tilted his head. Did she want an upgrade for Creati glasses? That would have to wait until after sport festival. Or maybe it wasn't connected in any way to the hero support business. If so, what could that be? "I'm very interested in how have you managed to make your suit fly. You've said something about repulsor tech, but after researching it, I found nothing about it," she said, looking at him with expectancy. "Right. You still haven't told me about that baby," Mei added, wriggling on Yamamo's lap. How could he say no to their thirst of knowledge? He couldn't. But that didn't mean he couldn't get a little bit fun from it. Putting his elbow against workbench, he supported his head on his palm and sent them teasing smirk. "Oh, I don't know. That stuff is pretty hard and boring. I don't want you to fall asleep," he said in the smuggest voice he could muster. Seeing them pout at him with annoyed looks was absolutely worth in his opinion. Izuku stood up and went to Hollitable. Getting the Mark II design, he highlighted repulsor system and turned towards the girls. "Okay, as you can see it all starts from arc reactor. Not only it's the power source, but also it gives necessary stuff to the repulsors in chest piece, hands and soles of the boots, but about that later. Repulsor's system is a bit similar to Hadron Collider, it's a miniature particle accelerator. Part of it product are muons. For those who don't know atomic physics, muons are subatomic particles, similar to electrons, but much heavier than them. Also they possess a short half-life time, but they can penetrate very deep. Their sources are cosmic rays or particle accelerators. To make muon you need to have a bundle of proton, which are supplied from reactor, collide with a sort of barrier. That barrier is placed at the end of those special cables, just before the repulsor outlet. Of course to do it, protons need to be accelerated to a near light speed. You archive it thanks to the coils placed around those cables. The other part that is produced in repulsors is plasma, you get it due to the energizing the air supplied by other system. So muons and plasma mix together and that super energetic mixture can give the suit necessary thrust to archive liftoff and flight. It can also be used as a weapon. Repulsor blast can do some serious damage if I desire so, but I use them mostly as a sort of knockout tool, he ended with satisfied smile. Looking at the girls, he saw Yamamo with glowing face and open mouth, she blinked at him a few times. Her lips moved like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. As for Mei, once again he found himself absolutely terrified of her. She was turned on by his nerd talk. Her face was dusted with pink and eyes were hazy. She panted hard, small drool escaping her mouth. Her body was shivering but not from cold. Faking a cough, he got girls from their astonishment. "So yeah? That's basically it. A fancy particle accelerator," he laughed softly. I don't know what to say," Yamamo admitted weakly. "How can you come up with such marvelous babies?" Mei screamed with excitement. Izuku shrugged, sitting back on his chair. "Don't know, ask my brain." They all chuckled at that. He was glad that he could share this with them. Especially with Yamamo, that girl wasn't inventor like he and Mei were, but she still wanted to learn, to better herself. He respected that. Suddenly an idea popped in his mind. The one that could either further push his chances of success and help his friend or would put a stain on their friendship. The question was he feeling lucky today? Yes, he did. Smiling innocently at Yamamo he begun. "Actually I have something else to share with you. Something that will help not only you, but all of us, to get a rather decent placement in sport festival. Maybe even win a whole thing." He saw her interest spark at his words. Good. Now he needed to grab it and mold into what he wanted and she needed. Yamamo pushed a chair closer, tilting her head, waiting for him to continue. Her bounciness barely contained. "So what I'm about to show you is a fruit of almost a month of work." He took a breath and pursed his lip a bit. "Just, all I'm asking you, is to have an open mind, okay?" Izuku saw her nod. He clicked on the folder with a generic name and wrote password. More folders appeared, but those were named after all first-year classes. He opened 1A, showing Yamamo files with names of her classmates. Opening one of them, he presented her with many pages describing the quirk, physical fitness, character traits, strengths and weaknesses, lastly were possible strategies to archive victory against them. He observed his friend, who read it all carefully, page after page, word after word. He saw her expression, she was both intrigued and scared of the amount of the information he possessed. When she ended, she sucked on her lip, her brows furrowed. After trying to formulate a sentence and licking her lips a couple times she finally said, "I must say, this certainly is something. But just, how did you get it all and why?" His voice didn't hide her bewilderment. Izuku almost smirked at her gaze. Her need to know things made her eyes shine. "How? I've got access to every camera in the school, courtesy of Alan." Of course he didn't want to give them. "He told me that, if I can hack the system, he wouldn't say a thing," he said in a nonchalant tone. "I did the hacking," his girlfriend happily confessed, which made him laugh. "You sure did. Mei is an excellent hacker. But she can't program a thing." He ignored a pouty face she gave him. "As for why?" Izuku paused and adopted a more thoughtful expression. All my life I was ridiculed for not having a quirk. Our society sees them as a trait more important than anything else. They define us and categorize us by them. By not having one, I became the element that wasn't able to fit anywhere. But I had something better. I had my mind. I trained it by reading books, solving puzzles, learning new things and analyzing others. He looked at shocked Yamamoto. As it was said long time ago, knowledge is a power. And Sport Festival isn't only a test of our quirks and muscles. It's also a test of our ability to gather information, plan for future and adapt for unexpected. Her gaze was concentrated on him. No hero or villain is invincible. Every human being possesses something that could lead to their fall. It's just a matter of knowing it. That's why I developed those profiles, those plans to take down not only a hero class students, but any other. His fists tightened. While I want to become a hero with every fiber of my being, I want to prove the society wrong. Show them that quirks aren't everything that determines us. I want to prove myself. Prove that I can stand next to the other heroes. He grinned and extended his open palm towards Odd Yamamoto. So, want to throw everyone's expectations through the window by advancing to the finals? Nizu marveled at the faces of his fellow teachers. Their shocked expressions really helped with his sour mood. Mike, Midnight and Vlad looked like they were about to pass out. 13 and Ectoplasm spoke in hushed tones. Hound Dog had his jaw open. Aizawa's eyes were closed as he rubbed his scalp. Yagi was absolutely awed. And Power Loader just joined him in mutual, borderline insane laughter. All thanks to Midoriya's explanation about the repulsor technology. He needed to thank Alan for putting it on the speakers, in the middle of the meeting. How is he in high school? Vlad asked in weak voice. Yeah, he should teach physics in the college. Mike added. I never want to hear anything about the physics. Ever. Midnight said with groan. Knowing the kid, he's going to do something like that again. Power Loader said with chuckle. I certainly hope for that. I still remember how he called his arc reactor. In simple terms, it's just a very fancy cold fusion. Nizu told them with fond smile. He built something that was previously thought as impossible. And in such small scale. Ectoplasm stated with his usual gruff voice. Midoriya just rewrote some of our physics laws. 13 added, utterly gobsmacked. We can marvel and talk about it later. Now I must ask everyone except Hound Dog and Aizawa to leave my office. Nizu told them with polite voice. When door closed, Nizu's small smile dropped. He turned to Hound Dog, along with Eraserhead. After few moments and heavy sigh psychologist begun. To be honest? I don't really know how to work with that kid. I had some problematic ones before, but he sees every questions like a sort of disgrace and thinks, quoting him, that I'm looking down on him. The case of superiority and inferiority complexes are clearly evident. He just stares at me with those angry eyes all the time, and when the time is over, he walks away, slamming the doors shut. I can't press on him, because that will only make matter worse, but I'm running out of the ideas of what to ask to not trigger him. Hound Dog reported. Perhaps a detailed background check would help us? Aizawa suggested. Nizu, played with his paws for a moment, frown marred his features. I'll get it done as fast as I can, he stated in somber tone. Principal. Hound Dog said softly. That kid, he wasn't your fault. And we learned from it. We won't make the same mistake again, he tried to sound reassuring. Nizu looked through the window with sad look. I really hope you're right about it. Momo laid on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Sport Festival was tomorrow and she needed to rest for it, but her mind was too preoccupied with random thoughts to let her sleep. And it all was connected to the baby-making duo. Not even her beloved romance manga helped. She extended her right hand upwards and stared at it. The same one that took Midoriya's palm, signaling her want to be a part of his grand master plan. Of course, May also added her hand. During the last week of preparations she went over proposed strategies of what they should do during different stages of festival, giving her input and changing necessary parts. They didn't know what games would be thrown at them, but it revolved around the same thing. Sticking together and helping each other advance. They were sure that the third round was going to be a one-on-one battles. It always was. They completely ruled out the possibilities of not having a hero students advance to that part. It wasn't that they didn't believe in other courses and their determination, especially those who were trying to become heroes. They respected it. But looking over the files of her and 1B classes she understood that the possibility of them failing was low. Very low. She studied the profiles of hero course, thinking about the ways for her to defeat them. Some were easy, others were tricky, lastly were those which all came down to what she and her opponent did. Momo sighed and turned to the side, still gazing at her hand. Midoriya and Mei, her best friends. Her first real friends. Midoriya, that stopped being right. She found herself wanting to call him by his name, just like Mei does. Izuku, she whispered, trying out how that sounded. She liked it. Her heart beat faster. She also wanted them to refer to her by her name. She wanted to be close to them, hold their hands, hug them, look into their beautiful eyes, pet their soft hair, hear them talk and laugh with her, see their bright smiles. Her mind paused. Was that how you were supposed to feel about your friends? She had others, like girls and few boys from her class and Kendo from 1B to Momo also, though of them in friendly terms. She wanted to spend time with them, but none of them were as close to her as baby-making duo was. She closed her eyes, trying to fall asleep. Soon she dreamed about her spending time with Izuku and Mei, with fond smile gracing her lips. Mei twisted her screwdriver a few times before she felt resistance and couldn't turn more. Last bolt was secure. Putting her baby away, she jumped onto her bed and stretched. Excitement about tomorrow was already making itself known. Finally she could show the world her brilliance and her adorable babies. Well, not only hers, but she and Izuku shared rights to them, so it was the same thing. Right? She remembered the plans that he and Yamamoto made. Of course she shared her ideas here and there. She wasn't much of the strategies, but after listening them talk about it over and over again, some things started popping in her head. They were really glad for her input. At first she wanted to just survive until one-on-one phase, go for one match, where she could showcase her awesome babies and be done with it. But her boyfriend and friend told her how important it was to indicate that those cute children of her would work in different scenarios. Her main concern was that the batteries wouldn't last that long, but Izuku was a good boyfriend and helped her upgrade it all to accommodate arc reactors. She kissed him good for it. Now she didn't need to worry about her babies to stop working in the middle of the fight. She still didn't know when he made over 20 of those, but it didn't matter. She didn't really know how to fight, but Izuku and Yamamoto drilled into her head a few things about CQC and gave her tips on what to do with what. To maximize her chance of advancing, she would read a file on her opponent before the match and think of something fast. She was good at improvising, so she hoped it would all end well. If she came empty-handed, she could always ask Izuku or Yamamoto for help. They would gladly lend her a hand. No doubt here. Yamamoto, it was still too long. Momo, Momo, Momo. She repeated the name a few times. It sounded better. And was faster to say. From this day on, she would only refer to her friend per Momo. Oh, hello funny, happy feeling in the stomach, that was almost constant in her life by now. Seriously, ever since she sat on girl's lap, that feeling never left her. Did she like Momo? Stupid question. Of course she did. But did she like her the same as Izuku? Wait, she loved Izuku. They were dating, that boyfriend-girlfriend thingy. Back to the matter at hand. Did she? She wasn't exactly sure. Comparing Momo to her other friends from 1A seemed like a silly thing to do. It wasn't that Mei didn't like them. They just weren't Momo, who was very, very, very important to her, understood her, held her hand, hugged her, talked and laughed with her, bounced around with her, when a cool baby was done. Izuku did the same. With only difference that he didn't jump around, but kissed her instead. So maybe she liked Momo the same way? No use dwelling on that, with Izuku it resolved itself on its own, so here it would too. She was sure of it. She closed her eyes and stayed dreaming about the world, marveling at her babies. Izuku and Momo were there too, holding her in tight hug. She grinned in her sleep at the scene. Momo looked around the locker. Everyone were already in their sports suits. Some were chatting, others were sitting in silence, and small group joined her in doing simple warm-up stretches. She didn't want to pull a muscle and lose her chance of showing off her skills. That would deal a huge blow to her hero carrier. Not to mention she didn't want to disappoint or worry Izuku and Mei. She sighed. Yet again she called him Izuku. It really boosted her mood greatly, being able to use his name in her mind. But she wasn't sure if she could say it out loud. Into his face. Her cheeks heat up at that thought. She heard a particularly loud voice, screaming something about squashing someone like a bug. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Bakugo. All students, get ready to leave your lockers. Sport festival will begin in few minutes. Alan's voice sounded through speaker. Everyone, gather up, we're going into the tunnel, but don't step into the field without the announcement. Momo stated to her class, opening the doors. Standing at the edge of the tunnel, she could see the stadium filled to the brim with people. Already they were making noise, showing their excitement. She caught the sight of few heroes in the crowd, no doubt there were many more. It was only natural that they wanted to observe them and consider sending them and offer work studies. Soon the present mic voice sounded, firing up the crowd even more. Now, without any more delay, get ready to give a cheer to those guys. From Hero Course, the class that already had a run with real villains and came out without the scratch. Class 1A. Momo took a breath and stepped into the field, leading her class into the daylight. She rose her hand, and with small, kind smile, she waved to the people who would watch them all, while they gave their best. She stopped near the podium on which Midnight stood. The following introductions were utterly plain. She felt bad for them, besides it wasn't like they wanted to have a run with villains. That was until it came to the support course. Now from the support department. Class 1H, and leading them into the field is no other than a student, who should teach at the university. Trust me when I say, that his nickname, Genius Boy, is well deserved. Momo turned around and saw her friends with their classmates. Mei was jumping around with huge grin, waving enthusiastically. She had her hover boots, jetpack, and modified grapple gun. The weird headset around girl head actually make her look adorable. As for Izuku, he hid his face in his palm. She understood that Mike Sensei basically singled him out. He had boots and gloves from mrkage without the armor. Arc reactor was strapped onto his chest along with a regulator. This was all for the sake of hiding his true ace, before the third phase. After all classes were on the stadium, present Mick's voice roared once more. Now the judge for the first year will be yours favorite. Erratetjero, midnicht. As for the cue, the woman started posing, showing her well-endowed figure, gaining the cheer from mostly the male part of the public. As for the commentary, today I'm joined by two gentlemen. One of them is a grumpy ninja, Eraserhead. And the other one? Our beloved principal, Nezu. Indeed, I am here. Principal voice carried across the stadium. I couldn't miss the opportunity to not see, with my own two eyes, the show first year would give us. There is so many talented young man and woman down there. He sounded very giddy. Right as always. Now we hand the voice to the Midnight. Thank you. She pulled out her whip and struck air with it. Let us start with the athlete oath from the student, who placed first on the entrance exam. Katsuki Bakugo, please come here. Oh no. Momo looked with dread as Teen rose step by step towards the microphone. This was bad. This was terrible. A large pit grew inside her stomach. No doubt Bakugo would do something stupid like declare the war on the other classes, which in turn would paint a big target on her and her classmates. Athlete oath, he said with indifference. Here's one. Bakugo turned towards all the classes with vicious sneer. I'm taking the first place. You extras can settle for second one. Momo gave out a depressed sigh. This was worse than declaring a war. All the booing from the crowd and angered screams from other students were well deserved. But did he had to say, extras? 1A already had problems, thanks to them taking out the villains. No need to further worsen their relation with other classes. She caught up to Midnight saying something about drawing the first game. On the giant screen she saw a lottery machine that rapidly changed names. Finally it settled on obstacle race. She already knew the rules. Along with baby making duo, she went through all games previously used in Sport Festival. When people started moving towards the exit and fighting for the first place, she met with her friends on the side of the crowd. Momo! Mei shouted, hugging her tightly. She was surprised by the way she referred to her, but it warmed her heart. With smile, she returned the embrace. Mei, I love your headset. Girl just grinned and stood next to her. Izuku approached them, handing her Creati glasses. She took them and activated right away. Thank you, Izuku, she said in grateful tone. Wait a second. No problem, Momo, he replied with bright smile. Her worry vanished. So he was okay with her calling him that. And he also said her first name. She turned to the side to hide her burning cheeks. Then she caught the sight of Todoroki-san standing at the front of the crowd. He'll try to freeze us in the tunnel, she stated, watching the teen with cautious eye. No doubt here. First obstacle is the getting out of here. Izuku commented. So, how do we do it? Mei asked, placing goggles over her eyes. Can we fly above the stadium wall? Momo questioned. Not with the current configuration of my regulator. It can't sustain such a long flight, he said with a frown. She nodded at that. Only option left was the tight passage, that Todoroki-san would turn into the ice cage. How about flying over their heads? The baby-making duo looked at each other with raised brows. I could help my hover boots by shooting grapple gun at the ceiling and swinging. Mei stated. Doable. Izuku confirmed, then sent her sly smirk. You prefer a piggyback or princess hold ride? Piggyback, please, she answered with red cheeks. She couldn't give to the temptation and take second option. They heard the count and Momo quickly secured herself on Izuku's back. She hoped that embarrassment would be worth it. She observed as mass of students rushed in and tried to push forward with minimal success. Then the temperature dropped down and ice covered everyone's feet, confusing them. That was their cue. Mei proceeded to do what she stated earlier. Momo was impressed with how fluid and graceful her movements were. Besides, she looked like she had fun. As for her and Izuku, she heard a hum of reactor and repulsors coming to life, lifting them upwards. They flew far above the heads of their schoolmates, not wanting to accidentally burn someone. She saw some of her classmates breaking out of the ice and gunning after Todoroki-san, hoping to steal the first place away from him. She wished she could cheer at them in succeeding this task, but she knew the bitter truth. The team was just too good for it to happen. After landing and getting off Izuku, they started running with moderate speed. The plan was to end it somewhere in the middle. It served few things, like not attracting much attention to them, saving up their energy and not showing what they could really do. Besides, Izuku couldn't run fast in those boots. Suddenly she heard a scream from the front. Gazing forward, she saw the massive robots blocking their way along with a bunch of smaller ones. Those were used at the entrance exam, if she remembered correctly. She witnessed one 0-pointer being turned into icicle, and falling down shortly. Momo frowned, looks like they would need to use creation to get through it. She looked around to find the safest way. There, at the side was lone 0-pointer, which, looked around not sure what to do. She didn't know why, but it gave of the lost puppy vibe. This way, she said, pointing towards confused robot. Baby-making duo nodded and they run towards it. When they're closing in, 0-pointer snapped his gaze at them and started approaching them, happily. She was ready to use flash creation and bring out the cannon, but the robot laid down in front of them. It red eyes brightened. Faether, it gave out a whine that hurt her ears a bit. Momo almost choked on her saliva. What? What was going on? Oh my god. It recognizes you, Izuku. This baby recognizes its creator. Mei shouted, jumping around the teen. She looked at her friend, who was staring at the 0-pointer with open jaw. Right, he reprogrammed them, during his entry exam. Suddenly, he turned towards them with the slyest smirk she ever saw him make and dangerous glint in his eye. I've got an idea. He knew it. He called it. He was right. His seventh sense was working correctly and almost all teachers owed him money. But that still couldn't get rid of the sheer bewilderment he had. And Nizu's insane laughter didn't help with that matter. Izuku Midoriya was a freaking problem child. And he had a partner, that power loader said was going to be a problem child. But of course it had to get worse. They were corrupting his class. It just had to be one of the most rational students in his class. Why always him? What did he do to suffer that much? Still, Shota had to admit, watching 3 problem children riding on the 0-pointer's shoulder and gaining on their competition make him excited enough to grin widely. Do you see it, people? I don't know how that happened, but let me say you this. Only Genius Boy could do something like that. Mike shouted into his microphone. Alan, which 0-pointer is it? Nizu asked, finally getting his laugh under control. The one that dug out Uraraka-san from under the concrete. AI answered. Oh, it's Puppy. Hisashi said with giant smile. Puppy? Shota couldn't help but ask at the ridiculous name. Yeah, he behaved like a lost puppy, when he tried to find a way to move around the girl. Huh? Shota supposed it made sense. Woohoo! Mei couldn't help but scream with joy. This was so exciting. She never thought that she would be able to ride such a huge baby, but here she was. She heard Izuku and Momo giggle at her reaction. Come on guys. Do one with me, she pleaded. Making things together always was more fun. They all gave out a shout of happiness with their arms thrown into the sky. Her boyfriend and friend were the best. So? What now? She asked them. They were the brains. We're closing to the front of the race thanks to the 0-pointer. Momo pointed out. We need to fall behind a bit. Yeah, but thanks to the... Izuku started, looking at the head of the robot. Puppy, she and Momo said quickly and smiled at each other. There couldn't be a better way to name a beautiful and loyal baby. Sure, why not, he chuckled. Thanks to Puppy, we've saved more energy for next event, he said with smile. The next on is a team thing, right? May asked, tilting her head. Yes. There's always some kind of game that forces students to show their teamwork skill. Usually the size is between 2 and 4 people. Momo explained, looking forward. So they could add another person? Would they need to? Probably depends on the type of the event. She hoped she could finally show some of her babies. How else support companies would send her their offers? May, can you see the next obstacle? Izuku asked with curiosity. She used her quirk and zoomed in. It's some kind of rock formation? There are platforms of various sizes and ropes connecting them together. Oh, there's a pit between those platforms, she reported. Can Puppy get us through? Momo asked in hopeful tone. I don't think so. He can get us to first one, but he won't be able to move across. Mai frowned. They would have to leave that adorable baby behind. Maybe they could visit it sometimes? She was looking forward to it. Well, better this than nothing. Izuku said in displeased voice. So he too wanted to stay with this baby. He really was a good father. Soon they arrived at the obstacle. Some people standing next to the chasm were looking at them with shock. Good. That was a correct reaction when you see a fantastic baby. Okay girls, hold tight. Izuku commanded. She stood next to Momo and grabbed the part that was sticking out of the puppy's armor. Puppy, please carry us over, her boyfriend ordered. Zero Pointer crouched down, then it leaned over the chasm, grabbing the platform with its arms. It was long enough to secure the safety passage. They quickly run across. May looked down, she was glad that she hadn't fallen down. She turned towards Robot and approached its head. The baby deserved a pat. Her partner and friend also petted it, showing their gratitude. Robot gave out a sound, signaling its satisfaction. Thanks, Puppy, she said, grinning widely. Go back safely on the other side. Momo added with slight worry. Yeah. I don't want a baby of mine to be damaged by accident. Izuku stated in proud tone. Then he sent a sweet, innocent smile with closed eyes. Oh. Puppy, be a dear and help your father with one more thing. Destroy as many cords connecting this platform to the other side as you can. But don't hurt anyone. Yes, Puppy answered. It straightened up and looked around. Aiming carefully, he swiped down its massive arm, cutting down several ropes at once. People at the other side screamed at them. If she remembered correctly, that was part of the plan. They wanted to decrease the number of people and make them burn as much energy as they could. Or something like that. Let's go now. Izuku ordered, with Momo already on his back. They looked so adorable. May felt herself grin. Activating her hover boots, she speed up toward the edge of the platform. During her fall she used her quirk to find a good spot and shoot her grapple gun at it. It hit, which in turn made her swing. She loved the feeling of wind rushing around her, it made her heart beat faster. Jetpack on her back, that was upgraded to repulsor tech, would only serve as the option when she had no other choice. Something about revealing her hand too early, if she remembered correctly. Oh, there it was. That strange feeling of calmness despite her excitement. She didn't know how she got it and why, but it proved itself useful. She should ask Izuku about it later, he would know. Or Momo. Actually both of them would know. They were smart when it came to quirks. Speaking of them, May saw Duo flying from cord to cord, girl cut them with a knife she made. She briefly wondered whose idea it was. Landing on the solid ground once again, she looked ahead and zoomed. She saw that boy with dual-colored hair still on the front of the pack. Todoroki? Something like that. The blonde jerk was gaining on him. Some other students were also hot on their heels. She recognized Tsu and that weird guy with glasses. Izuku and Momo joined her soon enough and once again they run forward. I see the next obstacle, she informed. It's minefield. How does it look? Her friend asked. You can see the mines, ground around them is darker. Spaces between them are enough to travel safely, but you need to watch your steps. She answered. After arriving they saw all students carefully walking around the mines. Unless you were the leaders. 2 of them were far into the field and fought, trying to get ahead of the other. Blonde Jerk was using his quirk to fly above ground. Izuku walked forward and extended his right arm. He grasped his wrist with other hand and aimed. Izuku? Momo asked, curious of his actions. His lips stretched into a grin. Just watch. He fired a blast at the ground, near the leader's feet. Mines started exploding around them, making a huge amount of pink smoke. Soon more followed, completely obscuring the vision. She heard her boyfriend laugh and her friend shook her head with amusement. Mei didn't understood why though. Soon the smoke rose and she joined Izuku in laughter. Apparently his shot and initial detonation made two boys stumble, which in turn cleared most of the field from its half towards the end. Leaders already were running to the visible stadium entrance. Now we can cross, her partner happily stated. Mei activated her hover boots and helped them move around. Especially Izuku, who had trouble due to his boots. She wanted to ask them why they did this, but student passing them were her answer. Right, they wanted to end somewhere in the middle. She didn't know why, but it was their call. Running through the tunnel, Mei got an awesome idea. She caught their palms, making them all move shoulder to shoulder. They looked at her with quizzical expressions. That way we can get the same place, just like the team should, she exclaimed, grinning widely. Izuku and Momo chuckled, but their holds tightened. They gazed at her, sending her small smiles. They stepped into the field at the same time. She heard the crowd cheer, which really excited her. She hoped that they would appreciate her babies. Of course they would. After riding a giant robot, destroying most of the cords and half of the minefield, Momo Yaoyorozu, Mei Hatsum and Izuku Midoriya take the 22nd place together. What's up with those kids? Are they some kind of power team? Present Mike screamed with enthusiasm. They came 22nd? Was that good? She hoped so. And of course they were a team. The best that could be. She peeked at her teammates. They were pleased with result. So was she. Hey, that's not fair. They've equipment, someone whined. Mei turned around and saw a tiny crowd around them, small guy with purple balls on his head at the center. If she remembered correctly, Momo told her about this guy being a pervert and staring at all girls, especially her friend. She didn't like the kid. Actually it is fair. Izuku said smugly. Yes, support students are allowed to bring their inventions and use them. Momo happily added. But why do you have your glasses, Yaoyorozu-chan? Tsu asked, tilting her head. 2 reasons. Mei shouted, grinning at the clueless students. First one is that, it is a device I created and brought it with me, her boyfriend informed. And second one is that I've filled a special form to allow it. As long as the item doesn't give you direct advantage, you can freely use it. Things like Aoyama-san's belt or Sato-san's sugar containers. Momo ended with small smile. You could do that? Mina questioned with wide eyes. Yup, it's in the rules. You can read them on the school internet side. Mei answered. Even she knew that. Thanks to Izuku. Okay, but why were you guys working together? Kyoka asked, making others nod. Mei grinned widely at that. Hugging tightly Izuku and Momo, who also embraced her, she gave out a short laugh. Because we're a team. Izuku was satisfied with the results of the first event. Thanks to the accidental creation of Puppy, they saved much more energy, which was pretty evident. Most of the people, who passed to the second event, were panting from the fatigue. Sure, riding Zero-Pointer attracted some attention to them, but he and Momo agreed that it outweighed the benefits. Besides they had fun. He really should look into what happened with Puppy's program to make him so different from other robots. Momo, that sounded both weird and right. Being able to call her by name left him utterly overjoyed. But swirl of emotions got worse. He didn't have time to dwell on it. Gather up. We're heading straight into the second event. Midnight called, waving with her whip. All 42 students stood next to the podium and waited for the game to be picked. Izuku's mind started going through the plans. Second even always had a team-focused activity. His boots and gloves would provide some power, Mei'd give them necessary ability to move around freely, and Momo being Live Factory would create equipment to cover their needs. Maybe they would have to go and take one additional person, but it all came down to what game they had to play. Izuku looked up when machine stopped and saw it displaying Cavalry Battle. That one would be a bit problematic due to their height differences, but they could manage. Most likely by finding someone to match Momo. He felt Mei pull him by hand. Right, they needed to grab their friend. Squeezing through the crowd, he caught the sight of Bakugo being asked by his classmates to form a team with them. He looked really annoyed, but that was natural for him. They finally saw Momo, who was talking with Todoroki. From the looks of it, he wanted to recruit her. Well, tough luck, icy boy. Sorry, she's taken. Mei declared happily, grabbing girl's palm. Yup, we're team. Hope you understand, he added, and taking other hand. Right, I'm with them. Todoroki-san. Momo smiled softly at the teen and squeezed her palms a bit. He blinked at them and nodded dumbly, before turning around and looking for other possible teammates. Thanks for the safe. His friend said with sigh. No problem. Izuku nodded. Now we need to find someone. Momo quirked her brow. Do we really need to? I guess. Unless you want to be a writer, but Mei would be a better one. She could freely observe around and aim better if she's up, he explained, looking through the crowd for potential candidate. That's some nice boots you have there, Pinkhead. A tired voice said. Thank. Though? Mei answer ended abruptly. Izuku snapped his head to the left. He saw a tall guy with wild indigo hair and similar eyes, that had deep bags under them. He quickly remembered the file about Teen and felt himself smirking. He hit the jackpot. Mei? Are you alright? Izuku asked, faking his obviousness towards the situation and grabbed girl by her shoulder. What? She blinded and gazed around her, clearly lost. He pushed her back to Momo and gave them a nod. Looking back at the boy, he saw him scowling and getting ready to leave. Hey! Izuku called, making Teen stop. Do you want to join our team? Boy gazed at him with bewilderment. Looks like his info was right. He really was socially awkward. We were searching for fourth person and you're high enough to match Momo, which would balance our team nicely. He sent him soft, inviting smile. I'm Izuku Midoriya, he extended his hand. What? Teen asked with shock. Are you sure you want me? He sounded rather torn between being overwhelmed and happy. Yeah. You're going to fit nicely. I'm sure of it. He answered with excitement. But I've tried to steal your teammate with my quirk? Aren't you like, mad? Looks like he still couldn't believe in what was happening. Steal with your quirk? Izuku asked, keeping his obvious act. Oh, you have some kind of mind control power? That's so useful for heroics. You could resolve any conflict before it even begins. That was true. Quirk like that really would be beneficial to Hero. Have you thought about applying to Hero course? He knew the answer. Yeah. Boy scratched behind his head. He peeked at Izuku shyly. I heard that depending on how well we do in sports festival, we could get a transfer to Hero class, he said in longing tone. Then let me help you. Join us and you'll get a chance to show what you can do in one-on-one. We're all aiming for third round. Sue, his arm was beginning to stiffen. Yeah, sure. He grasped Izuku's hand. I'm Hitoshi Shinso. Nice to meet you, Shinso-kun, he smiled brightly at him. Then he turned towards the girls, who were watching them with curious expressions. Go grab the gear. Mei grinned widely and stated jumping, showing her excitement. What should we bring? Anything that is good for containment, but nothing too fancy. We still need to keep our hand hidden, he informed. Girls nodded and ran towards the lockers. He still needed Momo to create something. He led Shinso-kun towards the side and begun fiddling with regulator to up the power. He had a feeling they would need a bit more punch. So Shinso-kun started, looking at him awkwardly. What do we do? Izuku smirked and snapped his eyes back to the crowd. We're observing our enemies. This certainly is interesting. Nizu said, passing his binoculars to Aizawa. What do you mean? Yamada asked curiously. It seems like Genius Boy made an alliance with Hatsum and Yaoyorozu. It looks like they have planned this. Eraserhead stated, watching field. Oh, I see. So they really are some kind of a team then. Mike commented with huge grin. Nizu nodded and looked at young Midoriya, who was standing with another boy. He watched them as two kept themselves at the sideline, from time to time pointing at another team. He grinned, looks like Teen was already developing strategies. He noticed that Inventor and his teammates from previous event could place higher, but I looked like they chose not to. He wondered what they were going to do now. Aizawa-san, are you up for the bet? Nizu asked with huge grin and chuckle. Izuku checked the harnesses around his waist, that he asked Momo to make. They were secure. Good, they needed to be. This way they wouldn't risk getting split while flying. He was at the front of their formation with special board strapped to his back, next thing that his friend created. It had footstool with straps for riders' feet and bars for others' palms. Due to his repulsors he needed to have his hands free. Mei was their rider. She was the smallest one, had a good grasp on how to operate jetpack, could easily use her quirk to look for valuable headbands and warn them of possible treats. Besides, thanks to her headset, their 320 points would be hard to steal. She also had modified stun gun. Momo and Shinso-kun, who were accordingly on his right and left side, wore Mei's hover boots. Good thing that she made one additional pair. When their friend gushed over them, it was a cute scene to witness. Special handguns with cylinders were strapped to their outer arms. Inside those were balls filled with strong glue-like substance. Remember, we're going for taking candy from the baby strategy. We don't go after Todoroki's team and their 10 million unless we can easily take it away. Izuku informed with steel in his voice. What about blonde jerk? Mei asked curiously. Avoid at all cost, he said sternly. But, if the Pomeranian comes and starts barking. He added with hint of mischief, which caused girl to giggle. You really must hate that guy. Shinso-kun stated simply. Izuku chose not to comment on it. Game begun and they started slowly, marching around the field and looking for potential catches. Izuku catch the sight of mixed hero class team that was doing rather nicely with fending off any danger. As he suspected, Todoroki was under the siege, hiding behind his ice fortress. That seemed to be a smart choice, until ice changed literally into a goo. People poured in, but their target escaped, using a ramp Todoroki made. They were moving fast, due to Ida-san's quirk. No doubt Uraraka-san also played her part in it. Now, where was Deku? That's his answer. He looked over his shoulder and saw Bakugo along with Kirishima, Ashido, and Siro. They were gaining on them fast. I assume, that's the Pomeranian. Shinso-kun stated dryly. Activate boots. We're running away. Catch any headband you manage, he ordered. After a few seconds he launched his repulsors and begun flying away, keeping close to the ground. He had hard time maneuvering effectively, but somehow he managed. Hours spent in the testing room proved really useful. They're still on us. Momo, catch headband from the guys that's riding Beast Boy. Mei told them. Izuku snorted. Bakugo really wanted to beat him. He was kind of surprised when Blonde Menace didn't come after him during first round. Unfortunately for Firecracker, he would need to wait longer. Shinso-kun, fire behind you a few times. Make it look like you have a lousy aim, he said, steering them towards another team that was suspecting nothing. I won't need to act, Teen commented sourly. He heard a hiss of the gun and soon enough a litany of curses. Using his gloves, he stopped his team and turned around. He gazed straight at Bakugo's pissed face and smirked smugly. That only agitated Pomeranian more. Take this as a warning. Come again after us again and you're saying goodbye to Festival. With that he turned to the side and started running again. They needed to save batteries in hover boots for later. Izuku, why did you say that? Momo asked, both curious and worried. He bit his lip. Should he tell her that he wanted to literally beat the shit out of Bakugo for what he did to the girl? He still held into that wrath, it fueled him and pushed to have dark thoughts about Firecracker. He knew he'd just thrown a challenge at Blonde. But that needed to be done. I will tell you later, he would do it. Izuku felt Momo place her hand on his biceps and squeeze it lightly. He tilted his head to her and showed her small smile. Another team with annoying Blonde is closing on us. Shinso-kun said. Turns out, annoying Blonde was Nido Monoma from 1B. Seriously, dude had some issues. He started rambling about the greatness of his class, how superior they were and how they would finally take away the limelight from 1A. He said that while he recommended their effort and respected them deeply, all while shedding a fake tears, he needed to take away their headbands to assure that he would pass to the next event. It took him 3 minutes to finish his monologue. Wow. You're good at speeches. Are you natural? Shinso-kun asked with fake awe. Ah, finally. Monoma said, before his body went limp. Throw your headbands to us and jump of your horse, idiot, he commended in satisfied tone. Izuku caught the sight of Blonde throwing points perfectly into Mei's extended hands and using palms of his teammates as a springboard. He crashed into the ground hard. The rest of 1B boys were too shocked to comprehend what just happened. Thanks, Shinso. Mei happily exclaimed. Yes, thank you. He was starting to get on my nerves. Momo admitted with sigh. Told you. Your quirk can resolve any standoff. Izuku added. No problem. Shinso-kun told them timidly. Mei, how much do we have? He asked. The point value would determine at their next actions. Give me a moment, she started counting under her nose rapidly. 1,315. That should be enough, right? Shinso-kun asked hopefully. He was panting rather heavily. Yes. There are only 2 minutes left. Momo answered with confidence. We're moving into defense, right Izuku? That sounded like a statement. Unless something happens. For now we're changing our pace to march, he confirmed. Looking around he saw almost every team trying to get Todoroki's 10 million. Then he witnessed 3 of them rising into the air, leaving Kaminari-san on the ground. Teen used his quirk and unleashed a powerful electric wave that shocked everyone near him. After that the rest of the team returned, and immediately began running away from Bakugo's pack. But Izuku caught up to something. First place squad wasn't moving as fast as earlier. "May, does Uraraka-san look green?" he asked to confirm his suspicions. Yeah. She's about to barf," girl stated bluntly. Izuku stroked his chin, thinking if the gambit was worth it. They could get 10 million points. No need trying to get attention away from them now, when they'd no doubt advance. But they couldn't just go in. If they only had some kind of cover. Wait. Momo, he turned towards his best friend with small, sweet, innocent smile. "Can you make us some smoke grenades, please?" Nizu couldn't help but fidget in his seat. Cavalry battle proved to be a real thrill. He left most of the commentary to his teachers, savoring the chaos down on the field. Young Todoroki's team was focused on the speed young Ida provided. Thanks to young Uraraka, most likely, the only things Teen had to drag were clothes. Ryder himself continued to use his right side to create ice walls and protect his team with them. From time to time he froze the ground, trapping students after them. Finally young Kaminari served as an ultimate weapon to paralyze huge threats with his quirk. From time to time they took some headbands, most likely as a backup plan. Other interesting team was the one with young Shiozaki as a rider. Her horses were girls' classmate, young Tetsutetsu, young Tokoyami, and young Aoyama. He heard a few things about the 1B grudge against 1A4, taking down the villains. He was worried that problem could escalate badly, but watching this team function and gather points, gave him hope that things weren't looking grim. The chase that young Bakugo made against young Midoriya's team ended well and without the bloodshed he feared. He laughed when he saw Inventor using his repulsors and young Hatsum's hover boots to leave explosive Teen in dust. Then they glued them and he witnessed young Midoriya turn and say something. Whatever it was, young Bakugo's team left them alone, chasing after 10 million points. As for the genius boy and his squad, they took a tactical approach and stole headbands from teams that were distracted or too weak to pose a challenge to them. They left glue on the field from time to time to cause inconvenience for others. They run with young Monoma's team was utterly hilarious and made him check papers. He had to say that young Shinso's quirk would be very useful for Hiro. Being able to literally talk your way out of any situation was useful. Besides he seemed to be quite intelligent young man. Teen's homeroom teacher informed him that boy had aspiration to become a hero. If he proved himself, then transfer would be very possible. "What's going on?" Smoke filled the area. "You can't see a thing." Yamada screamed into his microphone, pulling Nizu out of his musing. He looked down and saw a great amount of thick, black gas covering more than half of the ring. Soon enough from it emerged young Midoriya's team, using jetpack, but the boy himself was missing. His mind quickly caught up to what was happening. He turned to Mike, wanting to tell him to hold off with commentary, but Aizawa already silenced his friend with his scarf. Nizu shrugged it off, "Whatever works." He gazed back at the field and after short wait young Midoriya shooed out into the skies, meeting with his team. Young Hatsum took something from his mouth and started cheering. Nizu gazed at the scoreboard and let out a laugh. "Look at that people." With only a 20 seconds left, Team Hatsum takes 10 million points for themselves, gaining indisputable first place. "That's what you call a twist," Yamada commented, making crowd go wild. Explosion happened and young Bakugo shoot up, flying towards young Midoriya with tremendous speed. Nizu felt a pit grow in his stomach. This could end up badly. But then happened something that he hadn't envisioned. Inventor pointed his arm at Teen and fired a repulsor blast. Attack was too fast to dodge and hit young Bakugo, sending him towards the ground. Fortunately his team caught him. Genius Boy protects his team victory, literally shooting down their competition. Who would have thought that he would be so set up on winning this with big prize? Nizu frowned. That kind of fall would easily put young Bakugo's life in danger, if not outright kill him. He took his binoculars and looked at young Midoriya. He had scowl on his face and seemed displeased with the result of his action. "Aizawa-san, young Yaoyorozu is rather close to our inventors, right?" he asked in curious voice. "From what I know, she's eating lunches with them and visits them daily. Whenever class talks about duo, she's first to join, abandoning her prim persona." Eraserhead said in his usual tired tone. So it seemed that young Midoriya's already bad relations with young Bakugo only worsened. Without a doubt after young Yaoyorozu close call. Nizu knew how Inventor's mind worked, or at the very least he thought so. He knew that young Midoriya didn't have friends before UA due to his quirkless status. And with how close the relationship between teens sounded, he hoped that his business partner wouldn't do anything too serious. By the way, you owe me 3,000 yen and month of detention coverage. Nizu informed happily. Aizawa's groan and quiet curse filled him with joy. Mei glued her eyes to scoreboard. They passed second round, just like planned. But she still had hard time believing that they took first place. And all thanks to that crazy plan Izuku hatched inside his wonderful mind. Using smokes to take away enemies' vision and going in with infrared goggles to steal that 10 million headband, while they took into the skies. She was nervous, her mind supplied her with many what-if scenarios. But then he shoot up towards them, headband secured in his teeth, grinning at them. That was so awesome. From what she remembered, they didn't have any strategy like that. Did it matter? Nope. And Izuku blasting down the blonde jerk, who screamed a bloody murder, was like a cherry on top. Mei turned around and quickly caught Izuku and Momo into tight, overjoyed hug. She felt them embrace her, which caused her grin to widen. Wait, something is missing. Correction, someone. She looked around and found Shinso walking away. Oh no, you don't. Hey, Shinso, she called, gaining his attention. Come join us. It's a victory hug. He looked at them with baffled expression. What? He asked in disbelief. Mei is right. It was thanks to you that we were able to advance, by taking away Team Monoma points. Momo stated, smiling softly. Shinso scratched his head and gazed at the ground. Small smile graced his lips. Without it we wouldn't be able to go after 10 million, so in a sense, you are our hero. Izuku added happily. Teen looked at them with shining eyes and open jaw. Mei and Momo nodded, confirming statement. They wouldn't go with that crazy plan if their win wasn't already secured. Shinso shyly walked towards them and allowed to be dragged into the hug. Guy really was socially awkward. Well, after he spends some more time with them, he'll open up, Mei was sure of it. So, who wants a lunch? I'm starving. Mei exclaimed, making them chuckle. Oh and you, she pointed at Shinso. You're sitting with us. Friends stick together, she started jumping up and down in excitement. Friends? He asked completely lost. Yes, I'd like us to be friends, Shinso-san. Momo said, bouncing on her feet. Izuku chuckled and laid his hand on Teen's shoulder. Don't even try to fight it. We're all dead set on this. Shinso looked at them and blinked. Finally he snorted with laughter. If you say so, he smiled at them. It was one filled with happiness. Momo kept gazing at the Izuku's tablet, that had a picture of matchups. There were some that piqued her interest. Like Mei's and her classmate, Ida-san. He was by far the fastest in their class, thanks to his developed musculature and quirk. But with Mei as his opponent? She just hoped that her friend wouldn't humiliate him too much. Another one was between Ashido-chan and Kirishima-san. Here she wasn't exactly sure how it would go. Pink Girl was very nimble and could keep her opponent on distance with her acid. But if Boy could withstand it and caught their classmate, he may be able to snatch a win, but it was rather unlikely. Izuku's fight against their new friend, Shinso-san, was first. She remembered his file, especially the part about his psychological profile. Being scorned by society for what you have no control over. She had hard time wrapping her head around it. Why would people do it? In sense Shinso-san was similar to Izuku. She knew that strategy against the teen basically said, keep your mouth shut, but whenever she peeked at Green Inventor, he looked to be deep in his thoughts. His face betrayed that he was torn between something. She just hoped that whatever he's going to choose to do, it would be for the best. Her own match was with Tokoyami-san. It was one of trickier ones, but she had a plan. It was her second fight that she fretted over. There was no way that Bakugo wouldn't win his match against Tetsu. Blonde was one of the biggest obstacles in the tournament. Izuku pointed it out over and over again. And she believed him. Her run with Bakugo during exercise was still fresh in her mind. She felt her palms being grabbed. Looking to her sides, she saw Izuku and Mei, smiling at her softly, silently telling her that all was going to be okay. They always were able to tell when she needed their comfort. It melted her worry away. She rubbed her thumbs against their hands. XXX. Izuku was sure that it was planned. He could bet his money on it. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to kill or thank Nizu. Before his match, President Mike made special announcement and said that the school wanted to show something to everyone. That something turned out to be his arc reactor. Nizu praised him for developing it, said that it powered the school and bigger part of their region, told the whole world that it was clean energy produced using cold fusion, which was thought of as impossible to archive. Izuku could already imagine his mailbox getting filled with companies' requests asking him to allow them to use this to power up their fabrics. And that meant money. Lots of money. He already earned absurd amount thanks to school's reactor. Seriously, which 15-year-old earned nearly $500 million weekly. And that was about a 50% from the sale to Power Grid. He donated bigger portion of this to charity, but he still had more money than he could even know what to use for. He shook his head, no time for being distracted by finances. He had a match to win. He just pleaded that his plan would backfire. It is time, ladies and gentlemen. And to start things off, we give you the two guys who placed first in cavalry battle. Present Mike shouted, making crowd go wild. The first one to go is a kid who may be related to Eraserhead due to his eye bags. Seriously dude, do you know what a sleep is? From General Department, Class 1C, Hitoshi Shinso. Izuku watched his new friend walk out from the tunnel on the other side of the field and step into the ring. He had his hands inside the pockets of his pants and his shoulders were slouched, but his face held determined expression. He knew what the stakes were and what Teen wanted to archive. And his opponent, the smartest kid in the school. Honestly, he should be teaching at the university right now. How his brain fits inside his skull, I have no idea. From Support Department, Class 1H, Izuku Midoriya. He stepped out from his passage. Crowd cheered, but he paid no attention to it. He gazed at Shinso-kun and smiled kindly at him. As it's a first match, allow me to explain the rules. Midnight started, her voice carrying through the stadium. You need to push your opponent out of bounds, make him unable to continue or surrender. Everything is allowed, but don't use tricks that are too dirty or I'll disqualify you. Same with doing a serious harm. I can end match at any moment if I see that one of you can't go any longer. Is everything clear? They nodded. Begin, she said, striking the air with her whip. Hey, Shinso-kun. Izuku called quickly. How about we level the playfield? He saw Teen opening his mouth to say something. I won't use my equipment and you won't brainwash me. Just good old fist fight. That way you can show that you're not your quirk, that you have some others' qualities and get into the hero course. What do you say? He really hoped for it. He could easily blast him away, but that wouldn't do right to him. Shinso-kun was similar to him, society labeled him by his genes, not his deeds. Teen looked at him suspiciously and narrowed his eyes. And what about your quirk? Ah, here was the gambit. Did he use his quirk or no? There was no way of telling it. Izuku scratched his cheek and positioned his body in such way that his arm would hit it if brainwash was activated. He hoped it would be enough of stimulant to break the quirk. Chuckling a bit nervously, he gave soft smile. I don't have one, he said in sincere tone. Nothing. Nothing happened. His mind didn't go blank, his body wasn't limp. He saw Shinso-kun's shocked expression, that morphed into the understanding one. Okay, he said quietly and got into fighting position. His posture was full of open spots. Izuku reached towards the regulator and switched it off, he didn't want to accidentally use Repulsor's blast. Taking the initiative, he rushed at his opponent and jabbed at him. Shinso-kun barely dodged and tried to shoot his own punch. Izuku grabbed it and thrown Teen over his shoulder, gaining a pained groan. Boy sent an sloppy kick from his down position, but he quickly jumped back. Shinso-kun took that opportunity and rose up. Teen rushed at him, throwing punches and occasional kick. He was very telegraphic about his intentions, which allowed Izuku to easily dodge or counter. But Shinso-kun wasn't stopping. Even when his breath became quick and short and his knuckles turned red from hitting metal gloves, he still pushed forward. Izuku admired that and respected it. Shinso-kun was just like him. Both had seemingly impossible dream, were shunned by society and its people. No one expected them to do great things. But they didn't agree. They stood back and pushed forward. Izuku shoot a straight punch, which connected, and followed it with roundhouse kick, sending his opponent on the ground. Teen rolled back a bit, rose up and gazed at him. He know how to fight? Aren't you supposed to be some nerdy inventor? He asked, panting hard. Izuku gave out short laugh and smiled. I am. But you're not the only one who wants to become a hero? Shinso-kun tilted his head. So you too want to get into the hero class? He asked with curiosity. Nah, I'm taking SNHQT. His reply was laced with happiness and confidence. Boy's jaw dropped, his eyes went wide and he choked on air. He vaguely remembered that Momo had similar reaction. You nuts or something? Shinso-kun consulted. Izuku just shrugged. He only wanted to take the hardest possible route to make his dream come true. Besides, his girlfriend was Mei Hatsum, the girl who could cause explosion with anything really. Maybe he had some loose screws? Deciding that it was high time to end it, Izuku rushed at Shinso-kun and grabbed him by his jacket without much trouble. Then, planting his foot on the ground hard, he spun around and threw him out of the ring onto the grass. Honestly, how light that guy was. Hitoshi Shinso in out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya advances. Midnight called. He heard crowd clap and cheer, but ignored it and walked to his friend. "Need a hand?" he asked, extending his palm, smiling softly. Shinso-kun took it and stood up with a groan. "I got my arse handed to me," he commented dryly. Izuku patted him on the shoulder. "If you want to change it, be sure to swing by my lab. We can train together." "I may take up your offer," he replied, walking towards the tunnel. "You want to watch the rest of festival at my class booth?" Izuku asked quickly. He wanted to get to know his friend better. Not that he had anything against Mei and Momo, but having a guy to talk to was kind of a fresh breeze. His answer was Shinso-kun stopping for a moment, then turning around with ghost of a smile and walking into the Izuku's passage. When they arrived at his class booth, he was positively surprised when he saw Momo sitting next to Mei. Both girls smiled at them and pointed to free sits. He thanked to his classmates, who congratulating him. Taking the chair, he turned to his friend from Hero Course. "I thought you'd sit with your class," he couldn't help but comment. "I was, but they were a bit too loud for my likeness. Besides, Monoma popped up every now and then behind the wall and pick a fight with us," she answered truthfully, sighing loudly. He nodded at that. Guy really was unpleasant to be around with. Mick's voice caused them to end small conversation and snap their gazes at the field. Two of Momo's classmates were down fighting now. Denki Kaminari and Achiko Uraraka. This match was pretty one-sided in his opinion. When Midnight signaled the start, air around Kaminari-san sparkled and electricity discharged in all directions. Uraraka-san tried to dodge it by using her quirk on herself and jumping slightly up, but was still shocked. Fight ended instantly. Kaminari-san really could use something to control his quirk better. All that wasted energy? Mei, he turned towards his girlfriend with giant grin. "I have an idea for awesome baby." They delved into their baby-making talk and started bouncing off ideas, obvious to the outside world. The baby-making was too important to them. And this idea could be used for his suit, so it made that even more significant. "Mei, aren't you next?" Momo's voice, mixed with chuckle, pulled them out of the inventor's talk. "I am," she asked, blinking. "Oh, I am. Against that weird, speedy guy with glasses, right?" She tilted her head. "Ida-san. Just don't let him get close and you're good," he said with big smile. He and his friends and classmates wished good luck to the girl. Izuku wanted to give her a kiss, but this level of affection in public still was a trouble for him. "Baby?" Shinso-kun asked in weak, unsure voice. "That's how they call their inventions." Momo clarified happily. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." She looked at him with understanding. "Is there a way to get out of this friendship?" Teen asked hopefully. Izuku and Momo just laughed at him and his depressed sigh. Mei checked her babies again. Jetpack was good to go, hover boots ready to rock, glue gun sat comfortably on her forearm and stun gun was attached to the utility belt, along with few cylinder filled with markings and gas mask. She was ready to go. Present Mike screamed their intros. He called her a wild hurricane of madness. Excuse her, she wasn't mad. Her mind just worked in a way that others didn't understand. Except for Izuku and Momo. They were special and could keep track of her spawn of ideas. Maybe Shinso could too? She remembered the look he gave them, when she called him their friend. Mei really thought that he could use some people who would accept him. Besides, that was one more person to praise her and Izuku's babies. Wait, no time for sappy things. She had a match to win. Finally her babies could be used and show everyone their awesomeness. About time. Midnight told them to begin and her hover boots came to life immediately. The glass guy sure was fast. He was almost right in front of her almost instant. She did the only thing she could. Activated the jetpack. Shooting into the sky and using fans in her hover boots to steer her direction, she began shooting at Speedy with glue guns. He easily avoided them. Mei furrowed her brows. Time to use another baby. Grabbing gas mask and putting it on, she took one cylinder with pink belt, shook it and threw on the ring. Pink gas poured out of the container shrouding the field. Weird guy tried to avoid it, he even took a deep breath. Remembering what Izuku and Momo taught her, she dived down and got closer. She wasn't much of a fighter, but she didn't need to hit him. The more you moved, the more oxygen you used. So she just kept outside of his range, shooting with her glue guns. Soon Speedy had to take a breath, swallowing some of the gas. Almost immediately he started getting drowsy and swayed sideways. Looks like sleeping gas worked faster than they assumed. Maybe they should check in later. Landing on the ground, she walked toward her opponent. He tried his best to stay awake. She just pushed him, making him fall on the ground. Tenya Ida is unable to continue. Mai Hatsuma fences. Midnight called. She grinned. Babies worked. Taking a look at the place, where support companies had their representatives, she zoomed in and saw them talking between themselves. They were interested in her and Izuku's cute babies. Great. She hoped they would get great internship offers. Using her jetpack she rose up and steered towards her class booth. After landing and taking of the babies, she took the best possible sit in the entire stadium. The Izuku's and Momo's laps. She quirked her brow at their surprised faces, but grinned widely nonetheless. They just chuckled and started petting her head. Is this another thing I have to get used to? Shinso asked. Why did he sound so depressed? Her boyfriend and friend started laughing. She didn't know why, but decided to join them. Shinso just groaned loudly. Nizu observed battles between students with great amount of interest. Their fighting proneness, strategies, usage of quirks. It was just so interesting. And thanks to Alan, who transmitted every piece of possible conversation due to Midnight's earpiece, they could learn even more. He was pleased with how young Midoriya acted. A bit of surprise rose when he said he was quirkless to young Shinso, and near the end, when he mentioned SNHQT. Why did he said this? A puzzle for later, but he would get to the bottom of this. His jaw went slack when young Todoroki produced a giant iceberg, defeating young Aoyama in instant. He knew that boy was powerful, but this was a tad too much for a first-year student. Endeavor must have trained him hard. He frowned a little bit, hoping that it wasn't too hard. It was a sliver of hope, but he needed to believe in something. Nizu laughed silently at the response young Shiozaki gave to Mick's intro. He heard about her religious persona and pacifistic tendencies. While he admired it, he knew that girl would have to make a compromise if she wished to become a hero. Fighting was unavoidable in that profession. But she was good at capturing targets. Young Siro tried to get a quick victory by shooting out his tape and pulling young Shiozaki out of bounds, but girl just used her vines to her bindings. Her vines grabbed Teen and gently took him outside of the ring. Young Ishido and young Kirishima looked like they dancing. Girl abandoned her shoes and used her acid to glide across the field, literally making circles around the boy, who tried and failed to catch her. It ended with Midnight's calling the fight, when young Kirishima couldn't hold his quirk any longer, losing the protections from the acid, young Ishido threw at him. Next match was between young Tetsu and young Bakugo. Like he suspected, it was kind of the bloody fight. Blonde student was relentless in his onslaught, setting explosion after explosion at the metallized teen, who didn't back down and answered with his own assault. He needed to turn down the volume due to the loudness, but young Bakugo's foul language still cut through. Sessions with Hound Dog really were for nothing. The fight ended with Blonde using giant explosion on young Tetsu and sending his opponent flying with hard crash against the wall. Young Bakugo looked pleased with himself, which didn't sit well with Nizu. Before going back, Blonde looked towards 1H booth with his normal scowl. It's time for your problem child's fight, Aizawa-san. Nizu happily announced, getting growl from the man. Momo thought about using creation to get some ice in hope to cool down her red face. Why? Why did May have to kiss her on the cheek, wishing her good luck? It was normal, but at the same time it wasn't. Why was her heart beating so fast? Why was she feeling butterflies in her stomach? And why was she grinning like an idiot? Was that happy squeal that escaped her mouth? She took few deep breaths. It was okay. Everything was fine. It was just a simple gesture from her friend. Yes. Nothing more. It was normal for female friends to plant a kiss on each other's cheeks. It was normal for May, because she was touchy, adorable, bright, full of joy, cute, smart, with weird sense of humor that made her laugh, quirky, beautiful girl. She hated her mind. And would her face finally stop blushing? Get ready for the last match of the first round, people. The fight will be between those two. The Lord of Darkness, the Raven of Destruction, the eggiest kid in this tournament. From Hero Class 1A, Fumikage Tokoyami. Versus the recommended student, who can create things at her whim. Anything is doable for her. The class president of 1A, Momo Yaoyorozu. Quickly getting a hang of herself, she walked out of the tunnel. Stopping across her opponent, she gave a short bow, silently wishing them to have good fight. Tokoyami-san answered with simple nod. His eyes were slightly narrowed, keeping his gaze at her. Midnight barely called the beginning of the fight and Dark Shadow already was out, speeding towards her. But she was prepared. Momo ran straight at Tokoyami-san, surprising the teen, and at the last moment she slid under the creature, dodging a swipe. Quickly rising up, she continued her sprint, and glanced behind her shoulder. Dark Shadow was gunning her down. Pulling her jacket up, she used creation and produced 2 flashbangs without the pins from her back. Grenades exploded and Beast shrieked. She locked her eyes on Tokoyami-san, his face had displeased grimace. After watching video and reading his file, Momo learned his biggest weakness, that made Izuku scowl. He was absolutely quirk-reliant. When she thought about it, Tokoyami-san always had trouble during no quirk sparring session and frequently lost. Momo engaged him in combat and began pushing towards the end of ring. Boy had a hard time dealing with her assault. Compared to Izuku, he was moving in slow motion. She landed a few good hits and defended against any that he tried through, desperately trying to get her away. "You're wide open." Dark Shadow screeched behind her. She smirked and squatted down, a huge claw flew over her head. She created some more flashbangs, making the creature roar in pain and hide inside Tokoyami-san's body. Doing a leg sweep, she caused her opponent to fall on his back. Jumping at him, she pinned him down and got ready to strike. Her classmate's shocked expression made her smile. "Surrender," she proposed hopefully. Tokoyami-san sighed and relaxed his body. "The victory is yours." Crowd cheered when Midnight called her the winner. She rose up and helped him stand up. "I must say, Yaoyorozu-san, that I underestimated you. I believed that Dark Shadow would be able to easily defeat you. You've really improved lately," he admitted, before turning around and walking away. Momo blinked at his words. Did she? Sure, Flash creation was big addition and helped her tremendously. Her sparring sessions with Izuku also were beneficial. Now she knew the do and don't, could make a decent punch or kick and was able to keep track of people faster than her. But was it that noticeable? She returned to the booth and was immediately hugged by grinning Mei. She happily returned the embrace. Peeking up, she saw Shinso-san nod shyly at her. She hoped that he would eventually open up to them. "Where's Izuku?" she asked, realizing that he was missing. "Oh, after you won he ran back to the lab to suit up," Mei replied, sitting on her lap. Momo found herself enjoying that and begun petting her friend's hair. "Suit up?" Shinso-san asked, interested. They smiled cheekily. "That's a secret," they said in a sing-song voice. "Welcome back after the short break. Without the further delay, let's jump straight into the second round of the tournament. In the right corner, the boy who can give you a free shock therapy, from Class 1A, Denki Kaminari. In the left corner, Genius Boy, who showed us that he doesn't need his toys to whoop someone's butt. Class President of 1H, Izuku Midoriya. Present mix voice carried through the stadium, making crowd go wild. Izuku chuckled a bit at the intros and took a deep breath. This was it. He was going to show the world his way of becoming a hero, a thing that would keep them safe in the future. Wearing his mrkage armor, he walked out from the passage into the daylight. He could fly there, but he wanted to save it for the big entrance with Mark II. That is, if Alan finishes debugging and checking its functionality. He and Mei barely finished it yesterday. He heard people murmur and saw his opponent looking at him with wide eyes and open mouth. Zooming into the company's representatives area, he saw them talk enthusiastically and taking pictures. It gave him strange sense of accomplishment, which in turn made him feel happy. He allowed it to wash over him. He wasn't attention craving, but it was nice. "What is it?" Midoriya brought out some kind of costume. "Midoriya? Is that you?" Midnight asked with astonishment. He snapped open his faceplate open and smiled brightly. "Sure is, sensei." "Holy cow. Dude, this is awesome." Kaminari-san shouted ecstatically. "Thanks," he smiled brightly. "But sorry, you're about to lose, dude," he said with cocky grin. Lighting cracking around him. Izuku just smirked and shut his face mask close. He was prepared for it. When Midnight called the beginning of the match, Kaminari-san shoot out a huge wave of electricity at him. Normally it would paralyze you or get you knocked out. But thanks to the arc reactor and supercapacitors that he emptied down before the fight, it only tingled him a little and made screen glitch. "Power capacity is at nearly 300%, sir," Alan told him, showing him the exact number on his screen. That was interesting. This arc reactor wasn't new, and during sports festival its efficiency dropped to only 43%. To think that teen could generate that much power. Well, how about that? Izuku said in smug voice. Kaminari-san looked at him stupefied. From the looks of it, he slightly overused his quirk. That meant he was harmless. And all due to being awfully quirk-reliant. He charged up his hand repulsors and shoot a double blast at the teen, sending him out of bonds, in about a second. He walked over and saw his opponent, laying on the grass, with his jacket burnt a bit, but other than that there was no damage. Izuku let out a breath. He was a bit unsure if the powering system wouldn't go crazy with all that excess energy. He decided to go back to his class locker. He didn't wish to get bombarded by his classmates' geek questions or sit in the sun in his suit. Cocked Midoriya wasn't on menu today. Alan, please inform Mei, Momo and Shinso-kun that I'll be in class locker. Of course, sir. And would you like something to drink? Tea? Coffee? AI answered with usual cheekiness. Tea, please, he answered happily. He turned around the corner and almost bumped into someone. He looked up and saw red, spiky hair, narrowed, cyan eyes and flaming beard. Izuku scowled deeply. He disliked Endeavor. Sure, man was number 2 hero in Japan, but his attitude and that tense air he had made him absolutely unlikable. Besides, after reading countless damage reports and blogs about his fights, he was sure to say that Endeavor was his number 1 disliked hero. Boy, he said sharply, with superiority in his voice. I must say, I am impressed with your plan-making skills and intelligence. I assume that to coming up with this arc reactor and that power suit you must be very smart. Did he just praise Izuku? If yes, then why did it sound like his inventions were nothing out of ordinary? Seriously, just how much could one human be disrespectful? Thank you, sir. Izuku said in neutral voice. He hoped that Endeavor would just leave him alone. Your next fight would be against my Shoto. And while your device is impressive, I suggest you to give up. My son doesn't have time for testing the toys. He has a duty to surpass All Might, Hiro said in tone that held no room for argument. Toys? Did that burning trash can just called his life's work a toy? Izuku really wanted to use remaining power and blast that jerk with his repulsors. He still have to fight Mei. She's no pushover, he replied, trying not to sound too angry. Endeavor snorted and shook his head. That girl is going to lose. Enjoy the rest of the festival and try not to embarrass yourself too much when you face my Shoto. With that, Hiro turned and walked away. Izuku continued his trek, but was fuming. How could one of the top heroes have such audacity? Did that man thought that he was some king of the world, because he won the genetic lottery? Endeavor was just like Bakugo, jerk with gigantic ego. He shook his head. He wouldn't allow those words to get to him. He knew his worth, knew what he could do in archive. He was aware of it all. Opening the doors, he was met with sight of Momo and Shinso-kun helping Mei strap her equipment. Jetpack and hover boots were already on her. But glue guns were gone. Against Todoroki-san, they would be useless. In their place was something they called a sound rifle. It was a speaker connected to amplifiers and oscillator, powered up by the cord linking it to arc reactor in Jetpack. It was quite large, taking most of Mei's arm. Fortunately, the version for his suit was more compressed. He saw that she still had some cylinders and stun gun. Nice fight, Mei said, her usual grin stretching her lips. Thanks. You ready to take down the icy boy? He asked, opening his mask. Yeah. Hope that our present Mike 2.0 will work against him, she answered, playing with dial. He nodded, sharing her hope. Izuku caught Shinso-kun looking at him and admiring mrkage. He smirked at that. You like it? He asked, pulling his friend out of his bubble. Teen blinked at him and scratched behind his head. Yeah. It's impressive, he admitted. All done, Mei. Momo said, straightening up with huge smile. How about we walk you to the tunnel? Yeah, sure. You can watch the match from there, she agreed happily. During their walk, Izuku saw Mei using her quirk nonstop, not taking a part in conversation. Which was absolutely weird for his girlfriend. Was she nervous? They witnessed Todoroki-san bringing out a massive glacier in a span of few seconds. He had that information, but reading it and seeing were absolutely different things. Mei, you good? He asked worriedly. She hummed and blinked at him. She had a strange expression. Normally he saw it when she was concentrated while building babies. Yup. Just doing something that may help a bit. What exactly? Momo asked, showing her interest. Not sure really, but it links to my quirk. Two of you can figure it out later, she replied with small smile. Mei stood in front of her opponent, waiting for match to start. To do something kept looking at her without much curiosity. Was he utterly uninterested? Rude. How could one not show even a tiny spark of excitement for witnessing her and Izuku genius? Their adorable babies were too cute not to admire them. Oh, midnight was about to start the fight. She remembered the advice Izuku and Momo gave her. The word begin barely sounded and a wave of ice traveled towards her. Her answer to that was activating jetpack and taking a comfortable place in the skies, making it much harder to turn her into icicle. Putting gas mask on, she dropped 2 cylinders with orange markings. Those one had a rather nasty version of pepper gas. But before containers could release their content, Lollipop Guy froze them. She pouted, she liked those babies. And to give them such a cold treatment. Her opponent started making ice pillars, trying to hit her. But thanks to that strange concentration she archived due to her quirk, she easily maneuvered around them. Then an ice spike from a pillar shoot right in front of her, followed by dozen more. Did this guy try to turn her into the shish kebab? Flying further up, she pressed a button on PM 2.0 and pointed it downward. Baby started sending sound waves in rapid succession, but ice structure still stood. She touched the dial and begun turning it up slowly. Finally the pillars begun to crack and soon breaking apart, shattering into pieces. It worked. Better than during test runs. But it was loud. Even with sound protecting plugs, she heard the noise. She zoomed in to see what her opponent was doing. She saw him on his knees, hands covering his ears, mouth wide open and eyes shut. He was in pain. Mei pushed the button again and cut out the power. She gazed at the field. Ice pillars turned into a dust and in some places concrete seemed to have some cracks. Peeking at Lollipop Guy, she saw blood leaking down from his ears. And then he puked. Okay. PM 2.0 was working too well. They would have to change it here and there. Or give everyone in Japan a sound-protecting headphones. She lowered her altitude, hovering above the ground. Tadu stood up and sent her an annoyed look. Excuse her, this baby was theoretically still in testing phase. He looked like he still wanted to fight. Well, Mei also wanted to win. Normally she would just step out from the ring and go to the lab to work on her cute babies. But Izuku and Momo were here and watched her. And they wanted to rise to the top. So how couldn't she? Besides they promised each other to meet in the finals. If she won, then she would have to fight Izuku. And that strangely excited her. Deciding to get her win, she took the stun gun. Lollipop Guy sent another ice wave at her, but she steered with her boots to the side and dodged it. Charging forward, she got into the necessary distance and shoot to do with her cute baby. Immediately he went down, squirming on the concrete, screaming in pain. Mei peeked at Midnight, who was about to call the fight, when temperature dropped down. Snapping her gaze at her opponent she only saw a giant wave of ice, rushing at her. Cold? It was so cold. Like someone threw her right into the bathtub filled with ice. She couldn't breathe and move. The only thing she heard was beating of her heart and blood in her veins. Her lungs begun to burn. She wanted to take a breath. She needed it. Soon everything begun fading into black. Ice in front of her exploded and finally she could take a huge gasp of fresh, chilly air. She coughed, her throat was strangely dry. Her vision was blurry, but Mei was sure that she saw Izuku's armored glove. Oh, and his head with those softly glowing green eyes. She heard some noise, it sounded similar to his voice. Was he calling her? Or someone else? Soon more ice was taken away and she felt herself fall forward. Her body was so goddamn heavy. Someone caught her. Izuku's helmet was really close. Some of the weight from her right arm and back disappeared. Then something nice and warm touched and wrapped around her. Heat radiated from her chest, which made her want to snuggle closer to it. She was sleepy. Her body begun moving, but she wasn't in control. Looking around she saw the walls and lights on the ceiling. Momo and Shinso were here too. But why they wore such worried expressions? She wanted to call to them, but her voice couldn't leave her throat. Her eyes shut down and she drifted into the dreamless sleep. She was terrified. How could she be? Her best female friend was fighting against the boy, who was at the top of her class in term of power. And he tried to skewer Mei. Momo was impressed by the sound rifle. To turn that amount of ice into dust and crack concrete, it needed to be very powerful. Besides looking at Todoroki-san's pained face, she was sure that device could be extremely efficient when it came to disabling and capturing people. She didn't want to be at the opposite side of this baby. She thought that it was a good move to defeat Todoroki-san, by simply using a stun gun. Most likely he already had damaged ears, and with current position, Mei's rifle would hit part of the crowd directly. Momo was so sure of Mei's victory. So was Izuku and Shinso-san. They prepared to celebrate, but then she saw Todoroki-san slap his right hand on the ground. Soon the gigantic mass of ice flew at her friend, burying her under it. Her heart stopped along with her mind. Mei! Izuku screamed, shooting towards the glacial. She ran, Shinso-san next to her. She barely registered midnight call the fight. She observed Izuku using his hand repulsors to break the ice bit by bit, but it was going too slow. At this rate Mei would lose oxygen and freeze to death. Todoroki-san, she turned to the down teen. Use your fire. We need to get Mei out, she pleaded loudly. He looked at her with unfocused eyes. What? She asked you to use your fire. Hurry up and fix it. Shinso-san screamed, pointing at the mass of ice. I can't. Todoroki-san relied with weak voice and looked down. What did he mean that he can't? Her friend could die and he just refused to help them rescue her. What was the point in being in hero class, if you won't do what hero is supposed to do? Sure, he was shocked and his eardrums were busted, but no doubt he still could use his quirk. Alan, all power to the chest piece. Izuku called hastily. She turned to him and saw a huge beam shoot out right from the place where arc reactor was. It quickly destroyed the ice. Shinso, keep looking if we can see Mei, I don't want to accidentally hurt her. Momo, make something to heat her up. She's sure to have hypothermia, he told them urgently. She opened her jacket, not caring if people stared at her, and begun creating a couple of blankets, along with a hot pack, wrapped in cloth. I see her. Shinso-san called. Izuku stopped using his beam and ran forward. He used his hand repulsors to get last chunks away. When Mei's face became uncovered, she took a deep breath and begun coughing. Her face was sickly gray-blue and her eyes were hazy. When her friends finally dug her out, her body fell forward limply, but was caught by Izuku, who held her close. Get jetpack off, he ordered to Shinso-san, working on taking off sound rifle. Momo watched her friend closely. She was shivering awfully and her breathing was shallow. When equipment hit the ground, she walked forward and opened Mei's jacket, placing the hot pack on her chest. Then they quickly wrapped her in blankets. Izuku stood up with Mei in his arms and sprinted towards the tunnel. They followed him. They tried to call to their friend, but she didn't respond. Momo was worried. They all were. Girl's eyes closed eventually. Recovery Girl's office came into view and she speed forward to open the door. Something told her that Izuku would just force them open. Heroine just pointed at the bed and when Mei was placed down, she told them to back off and let her work. The wait was agonizing. They watched as Recovery Girl checked their friend functions. During it Mei woke up, but it looked like she didn't recognize where she was or what was happening. Heroine gave Girl some warm drink, but she only sipped a bit, before coughing roughly. Finally an oxygen mask was given to her, along with fluid bag. She's stable. Recovery Girl told them. They all released a breath, allowing their body to relax. She needs to rest up. You can stay, but be quiet not to wake her up. They walked to the bed and closed the drape. Momo sat on the bed and begun petting Mei's hair. Girl responded, snuggling closer to her hand in her sleep. Izuku leaned against the wall, massaging his face. He kept his gaze locked on their friend features. She peeked at Shinso-san, who stood on the other side of the bed and fidgeted. He caught her eyes on him and looked away. Sorry. I've never had any friends, he admitted shyly. I don't really know what to do, he sounded slightly mad at himself. Him too? Was it a curse or something, that all of them didn't have any people their age around them, before UA? She smiled kindly at him. Just being here counts as a sign of support, she said softly. They continued to sit here, watching Girl sleep. Somewhere in the middle of that, Recovery Girl came in with new uniform and asked Momo to help change Mei. Boys went out for it. She was still cold, but at least she wasn't as sickly looking as before. I'm going to make Todoroki regret it. Izuku told them, breaking the silence. His voice was cold. Momo looked at him. He kept his gaze locked on Mei's features. But his eyes, they were shining, a raging inferno of wrath behind them. Dude, no offense, but that guy can make freaking glaciers pop out like mushrooms after rain. Yeah, your suit is awesome, but do you even have a chance to do anything? Shinso-san questioned with disbelief. Izuku just laughed out humorlessly. It was part hollow, part menacing. It made her shiver. She never saw him like that. Then he turned to them and smirked. You haven't seen me do a shit yet, he simply stated. Yaoyorozu-san, your match is about to begin. Please go to the tunnel B. Alan informed her via her glasses. Izuku turned to her. His face turned softer and his lips stretched into a small smile. Go. We'll keep an eye for her. Yeah. Mei wouldn't want you to forfeit the match. Shinso-san added, looking at her shyly. At least that's what I think. Okay. She agreed reluctantly, taking off her glasses. She wouldn't need them. Before she left, she leaned forward and kissed Girl on her forehead. Momo felt like this was right, like something she was supposed to do. She was sure that Mei would do that to her. Walking out of the drape, she saw Todoroki-san on the bed. He peeked at her with his usual indifferent gaze. She snarled at him. Did he even care that her friend could die? From the way he behaved in class, she doubted that. It was wrong to think of him in such way, but her friends were too important to her. She stepped into her passage. Crowd cheered on present mic introductions, but she couldn't really care for them now. Her opponent was Bakugo, a dangerous foe. Izuku told them many times over and over again about him. His file was the most developed in database, no doubt due to knowing the blonde. She looked for chemical compounds that could neutralize nitroglycerin, that he had in his sweat. One of the solutions was sodium hydroxide, but could very easily severely harm Teen or kill him. So she took different approach. Momo looked at Bakugo. He already was in his position to shoot forward and end fight quickly. His annoyed gaze was firmly kept on her form, scowl deeper than usual. She cleared her mind and focused on her opponent. She couldn't mess it up. Midnight called the beginning of the fight and Bakugo rocketed towards her. She quickly created goggles and protective mask around her nose and eyes. Then from her hand came out a silver cylinder. She threw it at the teen, who did what she expected him to do. He exploded it. That led to setting free a white powder, which completely covered his arm. It was dextrose. Using his momentary distraction, Momo created 3 grenades filled with that substance and threw them forward. Soon Bakugo turned completely white and coughed violently. Rushing at him, she made herself a metal staff. Using her momentum, she jumped up and brought her weapon down. He raised his hand to set up an explosion, but nothing came out. The look of pure bewilderment pleased her remarkably. Her weapon hit him on the shoulder and Bakugo grunted in pain. He tried to get into close range, but she fended him off with her staff. She had the advantage of range, that Izuku taught her how to use. She wasn't giving it up. Still he attacked relentlessly with his fists and legs. He kept growling at her and throwing profanities left and right. Bakugo was just like a wild animal with rabies. Dodging his hook, by stepping to the side, she hit him on the back of his knee, which to him losing balance. Momo kicked him under his jaw, sending him on his back. She swiped down with her pole, hitting him hard on the stomach. She was going to win this. Yield, Bakugo, she told him, putting one end of her staff next to his throat. His eyes snapped at her and face twisted into expression of utter wrath. Growling loudly, he swatted her stick and tried to kick her, but she jumped back in time. Bakugo rose up, a single, little explosion popped on his right hand. Compared to his usual output, this was similar to sparklers. He ran at her and when Momo hauled off at him, he closed the distance by jumping at her. She created a metal beam out of her stomach, stopping his advance, but Bakugo managed to firmly grab her arm. He turned around, jerking her along. Blonde released his hold and she skidded forward. Before she corrected herself, he kicked her, taking away her balance completely. She fell on the ground in awkward position and her something crack in her left arm. A pained shout escaped her mouth. Suddenly her head was grabbed roughly and hit the concrete. Her mind went hazy and vision blurred. A fist connected with her cheek. She saw Bakugo with vicious sneer above her, ready to strike again. She lifted her good arm to protect her somehow, but he simply swiped down and produced an explosion. It wasn't powerful, but it managed to move her hand away. A kick to her temple followed almost immediately. She produced a flashbang without a pin, which got Bakugo to back off. She stood up, her legs shaky. She needed to do something. Blonde was already charging at her. Momo created a bunch of glass balls from her stomach, which scattered on the ground. Her opponent just jumped up and used his quirk to shorten the distance. He fell on her, bringing them down on the concrete. Her back hurt from the impact. Before she could do something, he began hitting her with his fist over and over again. Her consciousness started fading away, due to the pain. You thought that you could win, by covering me in that white shit? Think again, you fucking extra, he shouted at her. That's enough. Midnight's voice reached her ears. But he didn't stop. He continued punching her face, even after being declared as a winner. Only after midnight and Cementos dragged him away with great effort, the beatdown stopped. She could barely keep her eyes open. Heroine checked on her. Med bots are coming, Yayorozu, she assured her. Hey, you extra. Bakugo called her. Tell Deku that if he doesn't lose to the fucking icy hot, he's getting even worse treatment. After those words, her world went black. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. See you in the next part.